Hello and welcome back to the Not Too Shabby Cottage Rose Craft Retreat. If you missed yesterday's classes, don't worry, it's all available on replay here on YouTube. My name is Lynn and I'm excited and honored to welcome you back to the Cottage Rose Craft Retreat. We have 7 workshops premiering over 2 days. Yesterday, we saw 4 classes, and today is day 2 of our retreat, where we'll present our last 3 classes. But before we get started, please do me the favor of hitting that like button, and if you can share out this video to your socials, that would be awesome. This retreat is totally free to attend, and we welcome all crafters to join us. The more, the merrier. Our instructors will be crafting with the Cottage Rose Retreat Kit. This kit was designed exclusively for this retreat. And if it hasn't sold out already, you'll be able to find it on the Not Too Shabby website. Once it sells out, it won't be coming back. The kit includes a 6x6 paper pad with a matching ephemera pack and coordinating glitter enamel dots, a 6x6 stamp set and its coordinating die set, a 6x6 stencil, a word die, and an optional 6x6 paper pad that coordinates with everything. There will be a link in the live chat to the retreat kit, so do check it out so that you can see all of the options for buying. As well, there is a coupon code CR15 if you would like a 15% discount on this retreat kit. Speaking of the live chat, if you are watching live, I hope you'll say hi and let us know where you are joining from. It's always really wonderful to meet all of our community fans and friends from around the world. Our instructors will also be in the live chat. So if you're crafting along and you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the live chat. Or if you're catching the replay and crafting along and you have questions, leave those as comments in this video. Our instructors will do their very best to try to answer. If you prefer, you can always spend this time chatting with us and our amazing friends while you watch, and then come back later and craft on the replay. We hope you'll craft along and share your makes with us, whether you're using the retreat kit or you're using products from your own stash. We'd love to see your creations. Please share it with us in the Not Too Shabby Facebook community group. There'll be a link to that in the live chat as well, and that way we can all see what you've made. Don't forget, Jamie has put together a mega prize bundle valued at over $175. For a chance to win, look for a link in the live chat for where and how to enter. This prize is also open to replay viewers, but that link is in the live chat, so be looking for the link in the live chat so that you can enter. And without further ado, let's get started.
Shining, coffee's poured, papers stacked, we're ready for more. From coast to coast, near and far, we're crafting together wherever we are. Scissors snip and glitter flies, stamps are inked and colors collide. Cottage rose, let's craft away, laughing, creating all through the day. Layer with style, handmade magic, share a smile. Carved and tacked, some shabby chic, a little bit vintage, a little boutique.
Hello and welcome, friends. My name is Lynn, and for my workshop, I want to teach you how to make this little mini album. Actually, I probably will class this as a micro album. It's pretty small when it's done. It's only 3x3 and about ½ an inch thick. And it starts with a single sheet of 12x12 solid color cardstock. I'll show you how to score and fold it down so that we have our page bases and the foundation for the album, which then you can decorate however you'd like. Now, I used elements from the Cottage Rose Retreat Kit. So for the cover, I collaged up some of the ephemera pieces, and of course, I decorated all of the pages with pattern papers from the kit. And this is actually a stamps from the stamp set that comes in the kit, which I think is really great for a little micro album like this, because it can be a little bit of a brag book or just something that you keep on hand to make you happy. If you're having a rough day, having something like this in your purse or your book bag filled with maybe photos of your grandbabies, of your kids, of your pets might help to just, bring a smile to your face. So you could obviously put photos on both sides if you'd like, but what I like to do with a small album like this is I just put placeholders for photos just on one side, and then that leaves room on the other side for you to either just enjoy the pattern paper or actually add a caption if you want to add something to actually do a little bit of journaling along with the photo. So there's still space there and opportunity. And it's a very cute little album, great as a little gift. And so let me go ahead and show you how to make this. So we're going to start off by making the base of the album, and then I'll show you how to make the wrapped cover for the front and back cover. Okay, so as I mentioned, the album base is going to start with a single sheet of 12 by 12 solid color cardstock. So what you want to do as a first step is, if your 12 by 12 paper has a little extra strip, then you want to go ahead and trim that off. And in any case, whether or not it has the extra strip, you want to triple check that it is exactly 12 inches by 12 inches, because we want everything to fold down as perfectly as we can get it. And so you'll see here in a moment, once I trim this, you'll see that there is a little bit of that pink right above that strip. So if I had trimmed it just on the white, I wouldn't have exactly 12 inches. I would have actually more than 12. So I'm going to double check the other dimension and really make sure that it too is 12 inches. And if it's not, however much I need to trim down, I'll go ahead and do that. So there's an ever so tiny sliver, and that's going to make a big difference in the end, because when we go to score this, we want everything to fold down and be exactly 3 by 3. So our next step is to do some scoring. And this paper is happens to be two-sided with a different color on each side. So that's actually going to help illustrate when I go to fold this, how everything folds down. But you could definitely just use your regular solid color cardstock. And what I want to do is start to actually score. So if you have a smaller scoreboard, that's totally okay. You can always flip it around to the opposite side and then score from the opposite edge once you've done one side. So the measurements are really easy. We're gonna score it at 3, 6, and 9. So 3 inches, 6, and if you need to, you can score at 9, or if you need to, rotate this 180 degrees so you still see your score lines up here, and then score at 3 inches. So basically we're scoring this so that you have 4 even columns. So once you've done that, rotate this 90 degrees. So now there should be no score lines going down. And you want to repeat the exact same score lines. 3 inches, 6, and 9. Or if you needed to, you could always rotate 180 degrees and score it at 3 inches if you don't have a 12-inch scoreboard. So what I'm going to do is I just want to reinforce, because we might be folding back, we might be folding forward. So I'm going to flip to the back side. We really want to soften these score lines. So I'm going to score right on the same score lines from the back also. And at this point, we haven't really identified a front and the back, but we will in a moment. So all we're doing at this point is just softening where we will ultimately be putting our folds in. Okay, so now you have your paper scored, and we do need to make some cuts. So to cut this, either you can use a ruler and a craft knife, or if you have a drop-in blade trimmer, then you can use that instead. I'll show you both ways. So let's start with a drop-in trimmer. So let me tell you what I'm gonna do and then show you how to do it. So if you look at your 12 by 12, you're gonna see that there's 3 score lines going vertically, 3 score lines going horizontally. Now what you want to do is on the vertical score lines, we're gonna cut on the first score line and the third score line the exact same way. And that is, you'll start 1 block in and then trim, or right on that score line, cut all the way down to the bottom. And then repeat that on the third score line. So the first score line, you go 1 block down. So starting from 3 inches, and then we're gonna trim all the way down to the bottom, skip a score line, and do the exact same thing on the third score line. So I'll show you that this way so that you can see it. So this is my first score line, and I'm gonna go 1 block in, and I'll do it like this. And the nice thing with a drop-in blade trimmer is you can actually position your edge here to the 3-inch mark. So that should ensure that you're actually cutting on that score line. And so I'm gonna position that, and I want to skip a block and then trim from that all the way down. So my blade trimmer's all the way at the bottom right now, and you can either start on this edge and cut up to that score line, or drop your blade in and then trim all the way down. Now, one of the nice things about dropping your blade in and trimming down is that you can just go straight off the edge, and you don't have to worry about cutting it further into their paper than what you intend. So that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to drop this blade in. And the nice thing about looking at my trimmer from this angle is that on my trimmer itself, there's actually a groove here. And that groove tells me exactly where the blade is cutting. So what I can do is I can actually drop this in and make sure that that groove lines up with this first, what was my horizontal score line. I'm at the 3-inch, I'm scoring or cutting right on that first 3-inch score line that we made earlier. And so I can just drop that in and trim right off the edge. So when you're done, it should look like this. Okay. And that's the back side. And now we want to do the exact same thing on the third score line. So we're making all of our cuts. If I'm cutting vertically like this, I want all of my cuts to be vertical. The first cut and the third cut, or the first score line and the third score line will be cut the same. And I'll show you what to do with that middle score line in a moment. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put this into my trimmer, and again, if you want, you should be able to line this up at the 9-inch mark, or just make sure that your third score line is right inside that cutting track there. And what you want to do is the exact same thing. You want to skip down a block and then cut from here all the way down. I prefer that rather than sliding towards the part that we want to keep uncut. That way I can just, if I slip and accidentally go too far, that's fine, because I want this to go straight off the edge anyways. So I'll just make sure everything is nice and lined up. I'm lining up my blade so that this little groove, which indicates where the cutting blade is, it's right in line with this score line here. Because remember, we skipped that block. We want to keep that part intact, and we want to cut on the score line all the way down this way. So you should have something like this now. And let's say that was at the top, then that's what we have. Now we have one last cut to make, and that's the second score line, or the score line that's in the center of this 12 by 12. And we basically want to do the reverse of that. So what we want to do is we want to cut from this edge. See how we skipped that? And that part's intact. We want to cut from that edge all the way down, but we want to stop before we get to this last block here. So the 12 by 12 needs to all still be connected, but what we want to do is cut starting off of the edge, the opposite edge as before, and then stop cutting before it gets to the bottom here. Okay, so let's put this right back in the trimmer. And this is the cut that we're making on the 6-inch score line that we scored earlier. So see how this edge we've cut free? We want this opposite side to be the side that's cut free. So that means what I want to do is I want to drop my blade in on this side. Remember, for those first two cuts, I dropped my blade in this way and I went to the right. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to drop my blade in here, and then I'm going to cut upwards. So I'm going to go ahead and line this up. drop my blade in on this score line here, and then cut right off the edge, but on the opposite side. So now this is what we have. So everything is still connected, but you can kind of see we've almost got a little bit of a maze going here. And that might give you a little bit of a hint as to how we're going to fold this. And if you kind of separate it a little bit, you have an M. See how you've got a little bit of an M here? If I just pull this apart a little bit, I've got an M. Okay, so that's all the cutting that we need to do. So I'll go ahead, put my trimmer aside. Okay, so now it's time to decide if you want which side is the pretty side of your album. So that means which side do you want to have visible when your page base is decorated. If you've decorated it like mine, where you've basically got pattern paper pretty close to the edge, it might not really matter too much which side is the pretty side because so little of it is showing. But I did use a textured solid color cardstock for this, and so you can see a little bit of that texture. And just depending on how you plan to decorate your album, maybe you don't put pattern paper on every single page. Maybe you want to leave a little bit of a larger border on your page bases. That's totally up to you how you ultimately decorate. But at this point, if your paper is not identical back to front, you do want to pick what you want to be the visible or the pretty side. So let's see, I love this pattern paper because for the papers in this collection, this actually works out that both of these colors are perfect. So I've got some of the pattern papers here. You can kind of see the pink goes really lovely with this, but in some of these pattern papers, you can kind of see some of this like a very deep mustard yellow. That's really prevalent as well. So just pulling out some more pattern paper. So for me, I don't think I can go wrong. And maybe I think what I'll do is I'm gonna have this be my pretty side. Okay, so whichever side you want to be visible as your page base, you want to go ahead and have that be what you're looking at now. And then we're going to start in the lower left-hand corner where if we're looking at this and we've got our M, it's basically the bottom of your M here. And what I want to do is on this first score line, I want to go ahead and fold that as a valley fold. And before I burnish, just really make sure that everything is even Steven and that it is all lined up at the edge here as best you can. We want to keep all of our folds really, really straight and perpendicular. Okay, so that's our first fold. And then we're just going to do an accordion fold. So that was a valley fold. Now we want to do a mountain fold. So go ahead and bring that fold score line up. And before you burnish it, just make sure that it is nice and straight, nice and flush at the edge. Go ahead and fold that down, make sure everything's nice and flush, and then burnish. Okay. So next, we just did a mountain, so now we'll do a valley. And this is why I wanted to score on both sides of the paper, because sometimes we're going to be doing a valley fold, sometimes we're going to be doing a mountain fold, and I just want to make sure that everything is nice and soft so that when we fold, we can go either direction and we're going to get a nice crisp fold. So here's that first leg of the M, so to speak. So remember, we started down here and we folded valley, mountain, valley. See how it's starting to fold down to a 3x3 square? So what do we do here? So we need to kind of fold it back over so that we can start folding down this column. And we're going to continue to repeat that. So this was a valley fold. Now we're going to do a mountain fold right across to that column there. And I'm just going to really make sure that all of my edges are nice and straight and that this is stacking up neatly on top of itself. So that was a mountain fold to go across to this column. And now we're going to do a valley fold. So you're just going to keep on going. Mountain, valley, and we're going to have this accordion at the end. That was a valley. Next is a mountain. And so you can kind of see sometimes it might have scored in a way that when you go to fold it, if you're not checking, you could be a little bit crooked like that. You just want to bring that into alignment and then just make sure before you burnish that everything is nice and square. And you don't, it's nice that I happen to have this two-sided paper, because you could definitely see if something was visible that shouldn't be, because you want this to stack nicely and have everything nice and flush. And if you need to, flip it to the back side so that you can, now that it's getting kind of thick, you want to be scoring it on the edge that you've just folded. And that's how you're going to get that fold to be nice and crisp. So you might actually have to flip this back and forth. So we've reached the bottom of our second column now, and that was a valley fold. So now to go over to this third column, we just do a mountain fold over. And burnish. Then now we're going to go back up, still alternating. That was a mountain fold, so now this will be a valley fold. Mountain. And now I'm really going to flip-flop between the two sides so that I can get access to the edge that I'm actually folding so that it's easier to burnish. And really make sure that everything is nice and flush before I burnish that line in. Okay, so now I've got 3 out of the 4 columns have collapsed down, and the last one was a valley fold, so we're gonna do a mountain fold to bring us over to our 4th and final column. And continue doing your accordion fold, alternating between mountain and valley, and still paying attention and making sure everything is nice and square and all of your edges are lined up. So when we're done, you can see that big sheet of 12 by 12 has now folded down to a 3 by 3. And I mentioned that I wanted this side visible because remember we started with this sort of deep mustard color on top when we started our fold. So you can see as I flip through, so when you look at your book, you're gonna have two loose edges like this. And then you can see each of my page bases only shows this color. And the pink, this is going to actually get adhered to our hardcover. So I am going to use some chipboard. If you don't have chipboard, you could use just like a heavyweight cardstock if you want. But these two loose ends on the sides will be what we attach our front and our back covers to. But you can see how picking whichever side you want to be the pretty side, once we've done all of the folding, that's all that's visible. So your pretty side might be the side that has the texture to it if you're using a solid color cardstock that is textured, or if you are using a pattern paper that's more or less solid as your page base, but it's got a double sided print to it, whichever side that you want to be the pretty side. Now on the inside, that's all that should be visible, and you're only going to see the pink on the outer edge and the spine. So how do we turn this into an actual album? Because right now those pages really aren't flipping like they are pages. They're still separated. So in the sample that I showed, this one, all I did was ignore this first one that's going to get attached to our front cover. Then for each of the next every two pages, we're going to glue them together to form a single page base. You have some options here. So if you want your album to just have pages that don't have any pockets or anything in them, then you can just glue these every two pages together. So skip the first one that gets attached to the front cover. The next two pages, you can glue these two together completely. Take the next two pages and glue those together completely. And then you'll have two page bases. And then you just keep on going until you get to the end. I'm going to do something a little bit different just to show you a different option. And then you can always choose, if you're crafting along with me, to either follow what I'm doing now or follow what I described doing on this one, which is gluing it completely shut. Now, the option that you have, since we're going to glue two pieces together, you can turn this into a pocket. So if you're looking at your pages like this, and you have an opening on the back and on the bottom, you can have this be a top loading pocket. So to make that into a top loading pocket, what I'm going to do, let's just collapse everything down. So we're just looking at, we're going to ignore this first page that gets attached to our front cover. I'm looking at panel 2 and 3. To turn this into a top loading pocket, I want to put glue at the bottom so nothing falls out, and I want to put glue at the back where the spine of our book would be, so that it forms a pocket. And I think the best way to do this is with liquid glue, because liquid glue will dry completely, so that if you put something in there, sometimes when you're using a double-sided dry adhesive, whatever you put into the pocket, it might actually get a little bit stuck in there in that adhesive, which you could pull out, but it just might cause some frustration, whereas this will dry completely and you won't run into that. So we want a little bead of glue along the bottom. And the other thing with liquid adhesive is you don't need a lot of it, but it's going to be permanent. And so you don't need a really thick line of adhesive. I've maybe added about 1/8 of an inch of adhesive there. And then the other edge is this outside edge here that we're going to want another line of adhesive. And that's going to be plenty secure for this page base. There's not going to be, it's pretty small. You're not going to really be able to put anything super heavy in here or anything. So you don't have to worry about having a really thick line of adhesive. That should be plenty. And whatever adhesive you do use, you just want to make sure you burnish that, get the most out of your adhesive. So if it's a double-sided dry adhesive, when you burnish, you're knocking the air out, which helps it to stick longer because air can ultimately dry out and you'll lose the stickiness. And if you are using a liquid adhesive, it helps to spread that out, and it also helps to prevent any potential buckling or warping or glue lines. And that all just depends on the papers that you're using. But you can see that by only gluing this in 2 edges, I've actually left a little bit of an opening there. And so I don't want to get too close to that glue because it hasn't dried yet, but you can see I can still slip something in here. So that'll be a fun little tuck spot that you can then put some maybe movie tickets or some ephemera. If you want to use this as a folder to hold some ephemera pieces, you could do that. So then we're going to go to our next 2 pages. So remember I mentioned every grouping of 2 pages, you want to glue those together to form 1 page base. So now I'm looking at the next 2, but you'll notice that the next 2, they have an opening. The bottom already is closed. That's where our fold is. So in order to form a pocket, you can, if you want this to be top loading as well, then where you would apply your adhesive is along the sides, the back and the front sides, so that those 2 sides are also closed off and you have another top loading pocket. Your other option is, if you want, you can have, just to have something different, you could have this be a side loading pocket. So if you want this to be a side loading pocket and you want to leave this open, then what you would do is apply some adhesive along the top edge and that edge that's along the spine. So let me show you that as an option, just so that you can see how it differs functionally. But we're going to do the same thing where I'm just going to use a little bit of liquid adhesive, and it might help to always orient yourself. In fact, I'm going to do that now, where this is going to be my front cover. So I'm just going to write front here. So I always know this is my front, and it should be, that means that that's the top, that's the bottom. I'm going to flip to the back and I'm going to write back. In any case, that's going to get covered. It's going to get glued to our front and back covers. So don't worry about that. That won't be visible later. So if we're looking at our front like this, that's our top. Then what we want to do for a side loading pocket is to put a little bit of adhesive along the top. I do about 1/8 of an inch of adhesive, and then a line of adhesive along the back of the book, or where the spine would be, to close that off. And that's going to give us an opening that is side loading. So see here. And you just want to make sure that you burnish your adhesive as you go. And so now we've got 2 pages adhered. We have a top loading pocket. We have a side loading pocket. Be careful if you're using liquid adhesive. Give it enough time to dry. And just make sure that if you had some glue oozing out, that it hasn't inadvertently glue anything else shut. And so we're going to continue in that way. So every 2 pages, we're going to decide, do we want this to be a pocket? Do we want this to be a top loading pocket? Or do we want it to be a side loading pocket? So what I'm going to do is I'll do another top loading pocket here. So for a top loading pocket, you want to seal off the bottom so nothing falls out, and then of course seal off the side that is along the spine. So just a little bit of liquid adhesive. And I'm always kind of referencing where's my front so that I know where to put glue and how to orient myself, because right now we're just looking at just solid color cardstock, so it can be easy to kind of forget which way is up. All right, so that was page 3. So I applied adhesive along the bottom here, and I'm just running my fingers along that outer seam just to make sure if any glue oozes out, I can wipe it away, and that way it's less likely to inadvertently adhere something down. Now on page 4 here, you can see that the top is actually where our fold is. So your options with this, you only have the option to either close it shut completely or have this be a side loading pocket page. And so let me just show you what it would look like to close it off completely. Although I think that's not going to be any mystery. All you have to do is just glue it down entirely. So I'm just going to run some double-sided adhesive on the outside edges and a little bit of adhesive in the center. If you are making this as an album that will hold photos, you want to make sure that you're using adhesives that are archival safe. If you don't use an adhesive that's archival safe, it might yellow your photos over time. And maybe that's a look that's kind of nice, but if you want to preserve, all of that beautiful color of your photos, then everything that you use in this album should be archival safe in order to avoid that. Okay, so that was page number 4. We just closed this off entirely. So we just have a regular page, no pocket. And you can continue on the line deciding, do you want it to be top loading? Do you want it to be side loading? Or do you want to close it off? I'm going to mirror what we did for the first half of the album. So this is the exact center. So I have top, side, top loading. So I'm going to do top, side, and top loading to repeat that. So when we're done, you're going to have 7 pages and then a front cover and a back cover. So let's continue on, and I'm going to turn this one into a top loading. So if it's top loading, I want the glue at the bottom and along this open side here. And of course, you don't have to have pockets at all if you don't want. So you might want to think, if you're making this for yourself, what you might like to store in it, and that might be a consideration for whether you want any pockets. If you're making it for a friend, you can decide how they might like to use it and make it accordingly. And so for this one, we want it to be I'm going to make this into a side loading pocket. So I want adhesive at the top and on this back side. With this, there is the option to close off these two edges instead, and you could have made this top loading. So what we could have done was have, all top loading, and then our center would be the only one that doesn't have a pocket. So there's lots of ways you can adapt this and have it function however you'd like. So I'm going to do side loading on this. And you don't have to be super perfect about these beads of glue. Of course, the wider a bead of glue you put, the less room you'll have in your pocket. But these are pretty small pages. They're only 3 inches, so you're not really going to be able to store too much in them. But because they are small pages, I don't think you need a lot of glue to hold that pocket closed, especially if you're using a liquid adhesive, a nice strong liquid adhesive. Okay, we're down to the last page, and I'm going to make this a top loading pocket as well. Okay, and that is our album, all of our page bases complete. So look at that. We didn't have to do any fancy binding at all. It's all connected. It all has, it lays really flat, and it's ready to decorate. So what you can do is decorate the pages now if you want, or make your covers first and put your covers on. So that's totally up to you how you want to end up decorating this. But what I like to do before that step, though, is because we made some of these pages, most of them really, into pocket pages, I think what I am going to do before I start decorating is I want to punch a little thumb notch so that it's really easy to grab whatever I do end up loading those pockets with, or if I'm giving this to somebody, it just makes it a little bit more usable for them, a little bit more user-friendly, so that they can reach into the pocket, small as it is. I'm sure it's not going to be super hard to get into the pocket, but this just helps also let folks know that it is a pocket. And we're going to have one page that I won't punch a thumb notch through because it's actually not a pocket. So this is top loading. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a 3/4 inch punch. And you can measure this if you wanted, but I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm gonna aim for roughly center, like half a circle here, and then about the same, the same distance on the 2 edges of my punch. If you want to be more precise about that, you can, but I think it's handmade. I think it's fine for this to be an estimate. So that was the top loading pocket. And we've got our thumb notch so that if you put something in here, it's easy to pull out. This is a side loading pocket, so I want to go ahead and punch here. on the side. So about there. Top loading. And remember our middle page, the fourth page, this was sealed completely shut. So no thumb notch needed on that one. The next one is top loading. I kind of like this two-color, two-tone pattern paper. It's kind of nice to have a little bit of that pink peeking through. Then we have a side loading. And the last page is a top loading. Okay. So I like to do this first because I know that my punch, it's not going to be able to punch through more than just the 2 layers. So if I had decorated this front and back with pattern paper, then it there's no way I would have been able to punch through it. But it does present a another consideration when you go to decorate. You might want to make sure that you punch through your pattern paper so that it hugs that. But now we have a nice little thumb notch. It's going to be really easy to grab things inside of our pockets. So let's move on next to creating our album covers. Okay, so if you already did your homework, then you should have 2 sheets of pattern paper that are 3 3/4 by 3 3/4, and you want to bring out your 2 pieces of 3" by 3" lightweight chipboard, or if you don't have lightweight chipboard, you could cut a cereal box, or you could also just use a heavy weight cardstock, something like 110 pound, 120 pound cover weight cardstock would work too. It just helps to give your cover a little bit of extra bulk, and that way it can feel a little bit more substantial. So we're gonna do a little bit of scoring, and what I want to do is basically wrap my 3" chipboard, which is what I'm using, with my pattern paper. So you can see that there's going to be 3/8 of an inch all the way around. And one of the things, just depending on what you're using here, you are not going to exactly have 3/8 of an inch, because the more thickness you have here, the more paper is going to be necessary to wrap around that edge. So the way I like to do this is I am going to start off by scoring 3/8 of an inch on 2 edges. So I'm going to do, these are from the add-on paper pad. If you happen to get it, it's really gorgeous and coordinates beautifully with the Cottage Rose paper pad. So it's called Colorful Linens, and I picked a pink, and I picked this color to kind of go with my two-tone pages here. So I scored 3/8 of an inch from this edge. It doesn't matter which edge, just pick one to start and score 3/8 of an inch. Rotate 90 degrees and then score 3/8 of an inch from that edge as well. So we're gonna get started with one corner. So you can kind of see where those two meet up. What I want to do is I want to miter cut a triangle off of that corner so that I can wrap it around. But before we do that, let's go ahead and fold this on both edges. And what I like to do is I'm going to take this folded edge, put it up right against the edge of my scoreboard. I'm going to put my piece of chipboard in, and you're going to find that what you have left over, it's actually smaller than 3/8 of an inch, because this took a little bit of cardstock to wrap around, and it's going to take a little bit of cardstock to wrap around this edge too. So what I want to do is I still want to score a line, but I just want to score it right on the outside of that chipboard. So I've got this temporarily wrapped around like this. What I'm going to do is just put this in flush at the top, but I'm going to butt up this edge of my chipboard with one of the score tracks, so that the score track is right on the outside of my chipboard. And it might not line up exactly with at a really precise measurement, but this is gonna give you a better finish because you can fold it to fit. So now when you fold this over, it's gonna still have that nice crisp edge, and you can kind of already see how there's only like maybe 1/4 of an inch left here, and on this side there's 3/8 of an inch. So that's why I don't score both sides at exactly 3/8 of an inch. When you measure to fit like this, you're gonna get a perfectly wrapped cover that is also not going to require any extra score lines, or because we're going to do it exactly to fit. If you'd scored it originally at 3/8 on that edge and on this edge on opposite it, then likely it's not really actually going to fold over the way that you need it to. And you'd probably have to put in an extra score line to make it fold. So here you can see I'm scoring just right on the outside edge of my chipboard, so that when I actually go to fold this over, it will actually fit. So there we have it. Okay, so before we actually, and I'll show you that again in case that got confusing, but let's finish this first cover and then we'll repeat the process for the next one. So before we actually glue this down, what I want to do is miter cut each of these corners. And all that means is I just want to cut a triangle off. Now, I do not want to cut too close. See, there's still some cardstock that extends beyond that where the two score lines meet. That's what we want, because if you cut right to the score line, what will happen is you actually won't have enough paper to cover the corner, and you might have exposed chipboard visible. So we want to leave a little bit of paper that still overlaps, but you can see that the majority of the paper is cut away, so that when we fold down these two flaps, you don't have a lot of bulk in that corner. This is what happens when you try to fold down the two flaps otherwise. See all of that excess paper? It's going to create a lot of extra bulk in this corner, and we don't want that. So you don't have to be overly precise about this. Just trim a little bit off so that you are about 1/8 of an inch away or so from that corner. And then you'll have nice flat corner without a lot of bulk there. There's that. Okay. Now we can start to glue this down. So I am going to start off with some dry adhesive all the way to the edge of my chipboard. That's so that we get a nice seal all the way to the edge, but I do want this to be nice and permanent, so I'm going to do a little squiggle of liquid adhesive, and I'm going to position this so that it is inside of all of the score lines that we just made. And so everything should wrap around perfectly. Just double check. While everything is still wet, you still have an opportunity to nudge things around a little bit if you need. Now here, same thing, you could put the combination of liquid adhesive and dry adhesive if you want. And what I'm gonna do is, I did need to nudge that a little bit to straighten it up. What I'm gonna do is exactly that. So I'm gonna use my tape gun, put a little bit of dry adhesive, and the reason you might want to use both is just so that the dry adhesive will grab instantly and the liquid adhesive gives you permanence. So I'm gonna put a bead of adhesive right along the chipboard and a little squiggle in the middle of the flap. And then we want to burnish really well. Now, this is going to get covered when we attach it to our album. So that's going to attach right here. So all of this chipboard that's visible in the center, don't worry about that. That will get covered up. So I'm going to glue this down, really burnish it well. If you are using liquid adhesive like I am, you just really want to make sure you give it a nice burnish and give it some time to grab. And I like to fold 2 sides down first and then 2 opposite sides down first and then do the next 2. Okay. Make sure you also burnish those corners down. Now the corners still have a little bit of overlapping cardstock, so do want to make sure that's burnished down nice and flat as you can get it. But you will have a little bit of a bump there. It won't be as bad as if you had not mitered those corners. And what I like to do is these corners right now are pretty sharp. They're really pointy. I like to just tap them down. I learned this from a bookbinder, and it helps to soften that corner, and it's just a little bit of a nicer finish. So just tap that down, soften that corner a little bit, and then you won't have such a, a sharp corner there. So that is one album cover complete. And then you'll see when we put this in, most of that inside, because it was cut to the same size as our page base. So my chipboard was 3x3, my book is 3x3, but because we wrapped a little bit of extra paper around this, what you'll find is that the final size ends up being just a smidge, like a ever so smidge larger than 3x3. If I line this up exactly, you'll see there's a little bit of extra. That cover is a little bit larger, and that's fine. What I will do when I go to glue this down is I want the spine to be nice and flush. So I'll glue that flush, and that'll just give me a little bit of an extra bit of cardstock visible on this front edge here, which is kind of nice because a lot of times when I'm making an album, I like for my cover to be a little bit larger than my page base. But for such a small album, I thought it would be nice to cut it down to the same size. And plus, if you do have chipboard that's 12 by 12 chipboard like I do, you could cut this down so that you maximize your chipboard as well. So you'll be able to make several of these albums from a single sheet of 12 by 12 lightweight cardstock. So that's how that's gonna look. Let's do that one more time with our back cover. And I'll go a little bit faster since you will have seen it one time already. But we're gonna do the exact same thing. So this pattern paper measures 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. I'm gonna score along 2 edges. So the first edge, I'm gonna go ahead and score that at 3/8 of an inch, rotate 90 degrees, and then score at 3/8 of an inch. I'll go ahead and fold both of those. Put my cover in here, and whether you're using lightweight chipboard like I am, or you're using some heavyweight cardstock, whatever it happens to be, go ahead and fold over that edge that you flap that you just made. Then you want to line up the opposite edge of your chipboard so that it has a scoring track right on the outside of it. And that's where you want to put in your next score line. Okay. And then you'll be able to fold over and it'll be the perfect fit. Then rotate 90 degrees, and wherever you have that first score line, go ahead and fold that over. And you want to do the same thing. You want to line this up so that you've got a scoring track that's right outside the edge of your chipboard or heavyweight cardstock, whatever you're using to add a little bit of bulk to your cover so that it feels a little bit more substantial. And then you can fold that over. So with all 4 sides scored and folded, what you want to do is then miter each of your 4 corners. And what that means is just trimming off a little triangle from the corner, aiming for about 1/8 of an inch away from where the 2 score lines meet. You do not want to cut this right up to the intersection of those 2 score lines. If you do that, then you might see a little bit of exposed chipboard if chipboard is what you're using, or your cardstock. If you're using a heavyweight cardstock, you might expose the corners. So just make sure you've left a little bit of room there so that there is some pattern paper to overlap. And then you can adhere this down to your pattern paper. Just make sure that you're inside all of your score lines. And then you can glue all of your flaps down. So you can use a combination of dry adhesive and wet adhesive, or if you prefer, you can use just wet adhesive. If you're making this album as something that you think somebody might like to keep, then I think you definitely want to use at least a little bit of liquid adhesive so that it's nice and permanent. If you're making this and you don't think it'll be kept for very long, maybe it's just a little pocket to hold, some ephemera, some trinkets, etc., mementos. then you can always just use your dry adhesive, but just know that dry adhesive does have the potential to actually dry out and lose its stick. So that is a trade-off. So I'm gonna fold over my glue tabs here, and I like to do 2 opposite sides first, and then come back and do the other 2 sides. So then we're gonna fold that. And whatever adhesive you are using, just make sure you burnish it really well, because as I mentioned, in the case of a liquid adhesive, burnishing helps to spread it out so that you get more of that adhesive contacting the paper. And in the case of a double-sided dry adhesive, when you burnish, you're actually knocking air out so that there isn't any air, or as little air as possible, between the adhesive and your paper. And air is what has the potential of drying out your adhesive completely. So the more air you're able to knock out, the longer lasting your glue will be. So in any case, whatever adhesive you use, when you burnish, you're basically just maximizing the strength of that glue. So it's always a good idea to do that. And then totally optional, but I like to just tap these corners a little bit so that they aren't, see how it's super sharp right now? And then I'm just gonna tap it. And that just gives it, just blunts it a little bit and makes it less sharp. So I'll go around and do that on all 4 corners. And there you have it. So we've got our front cover, we've got our back cover, we have all of our pages. This is the simplest. There's no tricky binding, it's just folding and gluing, and we have our entire book all assembled here. We just need to attach our front and back covers. So as I mentioned, the chipboard started at 3 by 3, but because we wrapped it with some pattern paper, it's slightly larger than 3 by 3. What I like to do is I like to put the spine flush. So that's going to mean that you have a little bit of extra chipboard for the covers on this outside edge, which I like that. So you might have a little bit at the top and the bottom too. But I like having that little extra edge. And for such a small album like this, I don't really feel the need to make the cover larger than the page bases, but that would have been an option too. When you're making yours, you can always make those decisions and kind of adapt this to whatever you'd like. So when I go to glue down, see how you can see the word front that I've written? So this is going to be my front cover. I'm going to glue it so that this edge here is flush here. And top and bottom, it's as centered as possible. And you just want to make sure it's everything's nice and straight. And I think that's good. So you can kind of see there's just a little sliver of the cover at the top and the bottom visible, and then slightly wider sliver, about 1/8 of an inch on that outer edge. And that's because I wanted this edge to be flush with the spine here. So that looks like that's about where I want it. So I'm going to burnish everything down. And you can see that hides everything. It hides the chipboard that was exposed. It hides all the overlapping paper on the inside. So it makes it really nice and neat. And then we just do the same thing to the back. So I'm gonna go ahead and get some dry adhesive all the way to that outside edge. And for permanency, I'm gonna do a little squiggle of liquid adhesive. Now remember, my spine now is on this edge. But now that we have one cover in, I just want to make sure that I'm holding this, or you can put it down on your on a flat surface to really make sure that your back and your front covers are level with each other, and that way everything is nice and flush. So I'm gonna use my table as a flat surface, position them both so that they're standing, and then on this edge here, which is my spine, I just want to make sure that it's flush with the back here. And before I burnish, I'm just going to take a peek and really make sure that everything is lined up and looking as it should. So for example, see, you can still see that little peak of the album cover, a slightly wider border there, and a little peak of the album cover on the bottom. So that looks like it's centered pretty well. I'm holding my book to really make sure that on all edges it's nice and level and flush. And when that looks good, you can burnish. So this little micro album, it really folds down nice and flat, and you can see right now I haven't added any decorative mats and layers, and it's about 3/8 of an inch thick, whereas that fully decorated album, once you've got your additional papers in here, it bulks up a little bit. It turns that 3/8 of an inch into something closer to just over half an inch, maybe 5/8. But look how it's still it's not super, it doesn't spring open quite a lot. It still holds its shape really well and sits relatively flat, but also opens completely flat as well. So that's one of the nice things about this album, is that it stays super flat and is nice and compact, but still you can hold quite a lot here because you've got 7 pages on the inside to decorate. And so that is the base of our album complete. So now all we have to do is decorate. So for my workshop, I'm going to end with decorating, giving you a couple different suggestions and ideas for how to decorate these pages, but I'm not going to fully decorate everything because that's something that I really want you to kind of take your time to do, and I don't want to rush the process, but I also want to make sure that we've got time for the other 2 workshops that are presenting today. So we're gonna leave our albums unfinished, but I do want to give you some suggestions, some ideas for how to decorate each of your pages. If you are crafting along with the Cottage Rose Retreat Kit, then you might have noticed that in the pattern paper pack, there was a bonus sheet that has a lot of verses, and I thought this was a really nice one for the start of our album because it says home is where our story begins. So this might be a cute little album for maybe, you know, if you have a son or daughter, niece or nephew who's going off to college, maybe making them one of these little micro albums so they have something to remember home by, and you can fill it with a few of their favorite photos, maybe tuck in some of their favorite little mementos, and you might be able to even possibly fit like a small tea bag in here. If you have something like a little tea bag you might like to put in there. But I thought this was a perfect little sentiment to start our album off with. Now this is a pocket page, so I do want to make sure that when I glue this in that I'm not gluing over that pocket thumb notch that we made. So however you want to decorate your title page, if you did pockets like I did, and if you did a thumb notch, then you'll just want to be mindful of that. And I'm being very generous with my adhesive here. So this I'm just going to center left and right, and I'm going to center it top and bottom, but I'm going to take as the top the bottom of the thumb notch. And that will be our first page. I do want to put a little bit of pattern paper on the inside here, so I thought this would be a really nice one that's a little bit monochromatic. We'll get more colorful as we flip into the inside pages. If you followed along with the homework guide, I cut this to 2 3/4 by 2 3/4, and for each 6x6 sheet of pattern paper, you should be able to get 4 of these squares, and you'll be able to use like the front and the back side when you go to decorate your pages. So you'll still have a good amount of variety of patterns. I like to decorate my pages in pairs because when you open a page, you're gonna kind of see a 2-page layout like this, and that's why having double-sided papers is so great, because you can just take one of them, flip it, and then use one for one side and the other for another. So these are more or less the same once we trim them down. So I think we'll end up with something a little bit like that. Now here's where I was saying, if you punched thumb notches like I've done, then what you're gonna need to do is actually punch through your pattern paper as well, so that you don't cover up your thumb notch. And what I'm gonna do is roughly position this so that I have an equal border all the way around, and I'll show you how to do this the one time, and then that way if you've got notches as well, then you can do the same thing, where I just flip to the back, and with a pencil, I'm just gonna trace where that thumb notch is, and that way I can bring my punch over and I have a guide. So when I go to position my punch, I just want to be able to just see that pencil mark and punch. Now, when we go to glue this in, it should be nice and seamless. And you'll still preserve that notch so that you can have access to your pocket. So I think that's good. And if you find, I think I might need to take just a sliver off. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So you can always adjust this a little bit if you need. And I'm just gonna take a small sliver. It was barely anything. And I think that fits a little bit better, and it centers me a little bit better. So then I can go ahead and glue this down as well. So you can continue to decorate in this way. And of course, if you didn't do the thumb notches, then you don't have to worry about this part at all. and you can just glue down your pattern paper panels. I happen, as I mentioned, I put in the homework. I cut these to 2 3/8 by 2 3/8, but really that just depends on how much of your page space you want visible. So if you want more of a border to be visible, then you can always cut your pattern papers to be smaller. But even at this size, you're going to be able to get 4 panels out of each sheet of 6 by 6. And same thing here, except this time our pocket is on the, it's a side loading pocket, so it's on the side here. And if it helps, what you could do, since if you're holding on to a lot of things, what you could do is just use a little bit of temporary adhesive just to tack this down so that it kind of stays in place for you while you do your pencil mark. That might make it a little bit easier to transfer where that thumb notch is. And then go ahead and punch this. And there you have it. So I'll put this down. And of course you can always mix and match the patterns. I think that the paper pad is just so well designed that you don't really need to look too far or think too hard about pairing your papers, because for the most part, just flipping to the back gets you the perfect complement. So that the reason why I like doing my spreads this way is that you have one side that has a lot to look at already with the pattern paper, and then another side that is just a little bit more simple and plain, so that the pattern paper shines a little bit more. And as well, if you're making this for photos, you can decide which side you want to hold your photo. So for example, in this album, I always put the photo placeholder on the left side. So sometimes that was covering the pattern paper, sometimes it was covering the more subdued pattern. And that was just a personal preference for just keeping the photos consistently in one place. But you could always decide that you want to always have that beautiful pattern paper visible and always put your photo on the side that has, you know, the slightly more plain pattern. So as you're going through, you can always make that decision for yourself. So the other thing that you could do is you could decorate these, maybe put a little spot of journaling in them, and then put load the pockets with a bit more journaling. So that's another option that you have. Now, for photos and placeholders for your photos, you can do what I've done here. All I did here was I cut a bit of cardstock, and this was cut to 2.5 by 2.5. Again, you can use whatever size you'd like, just depending on how much or how little of the pattern paper you want to be visible. And so you can leave this here, and that way, if you're giving this to somebody or if you're filling it yourself, you can skip this part and just cut your photo directly at 2.5 by 2.5. Sometimes it's nice to have this even if you're filling the album yourself, because you can have you can use this white cardstock as a matte layer or a frame behind your photo, and then when you put your photo on top, you can cut it to something smaller than 2.5 by 2.5, and then that way a little bit of that white border will be visible. So you have some options there. The other option that you can have if you prefer, is you could use photo corners. So I have photo corners in both black photo corners and as well clear photo corners. And you might be able to get them in white as well, I suppose. I don't happen to have that. But if you want, you could use photo corners instead. So one of the things with the notch though is that you're not going to have quite as much real estate for your photos. But let's flip to this middle page, because remember our middle page I didn't have a pocket. So what you could do is you could use whatever you're going to have as the recommended size of your photo, and you can use this to position, let's say we don't put any pattern paper on this, and what I can do is just put a little photo corner on each of the 4 corners of my photo placeholder. Okay, and you just want to kind of tuck these so that they're a little bit snug. And then what you can do is just position this right onto your page. And I'm going to try to get it nice and centered. Like that. So this now is removable. And then whether you're filling the album or you are gifting this to somebody else to fill, they can just remove. I would still leave the little template in there, and then you could even write onto here the size, like 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. That way they know what size to cut down their photo to. But then when they go to fill it, they can just remove this and slip their photo in. And as well, if it's meant to be something of a little brag book of maybe grandbabies and whatnot, having little photo corners like this where you can actually remove the photos means that they can actually swap out new photos for whenever as the kids are growing, for example, they can always swap out some new photos and always have sort of the newest, latest and greatest happenings to share and brag about their kids or their grandbabies. So I've got that in black. I also have it in clear. You could probably get it in other colors as well, but that just happens to be what I have. And so that's an option for your photos as well. The other option is you could create a photo mat and have that be something that you can pull out of these pockets. So remember, we for this version of the album, we've got top loading pockets and side loading pockets. So that could be another spot to either put a little bit of a journaling page or put a photo mat that can then be pulled out. So let me show you what that might look like. Okay, so remember to make these pockets, I put about 1/8 of an inch or so of a glue line. And once that got burnished down, that might have spread out a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch. So what I did was I cut this piece to 3 3/8. So recall the pattern paper I cut to 2 3/4 by 2 3/4. This pattern paper I cut to 2 3/8. And then the white cardstock I cut to 2 actually this is pattern paper is 2 5/8. The white paper is 2 3/8 square. And that should fit fairly comfortably inside of the pocket. And then that way you can have something like this if you want to put it in this way so that a little bit of that white is showing, or if you prefer, You can just put the white matte layer on one side and then slip this in so that as you're flipping through, I mean, it's going to be visible from both sides, but your first experience when you're flipping through, if you want it to look solid, then you might want to put it in like that. And then as you flip, you'll be able to still see that a little bit. But this could be another opportunity to tuck a little bit of a photo mat into the pocket so that you have some extra spots to either put maybe some mementos, do a little bit of journaling, add an extra photo. So I like keeping it blank so that this can be a little bit of a journaling spot. So maybe the photo is on the page and then you pull this out, and that can be a little bit of a description or a little bit of journaling about that photo if you'd like. So these can be really fun little keepsakes. It can be a little brag book that you make and have it so that you can interchange and swap some new photos in. And it's just a nice, cute little micro album. I'm not going to put a closure on this one, but as you saw with my sample one, you could easily add a little bit of a ribbon closure if you'd like. All I did here was I just glued down my ribbon and put a bit of ephemera over top of it to anchor it to the back, and then I just left myself plenty of room on the front so that this wraps around, and then you can tie a nice little bow. And you can keep the album super simple and glue all of your page bases shut so that there's no pockets, and it's really simple and easy to decorate. You don't have to worry about notching out the thumb notch area for your pattern papers to kind of butt up perfectly. But I like having the little pocket pages because it just gives you more opportunities to kind of tuck things in, have little surprises to pull out. Maybe if you're making this to give, you can, especially in the case of maybe, you know, you're somebody in your family going off to college and you think they might be a little bit homesick, you can always give them or send them one of these and tuck little messages so that if they're feeling down, they can maybe pull out a message and it'll just be a little, maybe some words of encouragement, maybe some, you know, a nice anecdote, maybe a joke, something that reminds them of home. And I kind of feel like the sentiments that come in the Cottage Rose kit are really great because they're all about home. Like, home is not a place, it's a feeling. So, you know, even if they're far from their childhood home, they can still feel at home wherever they're at. And maybe the little album is a good way to remind them of their home and their family. And so I think these are really sweet phrases. And what I'll do is I'm going to end my workshop here. I know my album's not done, but I'll be sharing my completed album, and I hope that you'll continue to work on your album and decorate all of these pages. I don't want to rush anybody to try to finish it during this workshop because you can really take your time, be thoughtful about your how you want to use this album if you're making it for yourself, or if you're making this to give, then you might want to just take your time with some of those decisions and not rush through it. So I can't wait to see if you did craft along. Be sure to share what you've made in the Not Too Shabby Facebook community group, and don't forget that Jamie is giving away a mega prize bundle. There will have been links to it in the live chat, so be sure to click on over to enter for a chance to win that huge prize bundle. And I hope you enjoy the next two classes. Thank you again, and
sunlight shining, coffee's poured, papers stacked, we're ready for more. From coast to coast. We're crafting together wherever we are. Scissors snip and glitter flies. Stamps are inked and colors collide. Cottage rose, let's craft away. Laughing, creating all through the day. Cut it, fold it, layer with style. Handmade magic, share a smile. Cards and tags, some shabby chic. A little bit vintage, a little boutique. From desktops, craft rooms, kitchen tables, wherever you are, you're more than able. Scissors snipping, glitter flies, ephemera dancing before our eyes. Cottage rose, let's craft away. Laughing, creating all through the day. Cut it, fold it, layer with style. Handmade magic, share a smile. Different places, different skies, but when we craft, our hearts align. Not too shabby, we're here to say this creative love will never fade. Cottage rose, we made it shine. A piece of love in every design. Let's do it again.
Hey friends, I'm Lauren Taylor from Lauren Taylor Made, and I'm so excited that you're here for my class today for the Not Too Shabby Cottage Rose Retreat. We're going to be doing some alcohol marker coloring using Olo markers. You don't need Olo markers to color along with me though. I still think I will share some tips and tricks for any alcohol marker blending and coloring, or maybe you just want to color along with your favorite coloring medium and then we'll make a card together at the end. But I'm so excited, so let's jump into our card making and coloring. If you had time to do the homework before our video, you will have your stamped images. I stamped the girl with the floral basket, the rooster, the little lamb, a butterfly, and our cottage. I also stamped 2 additional girls with the basket so I can show a lighter skin, a more medium tone skin, and a little bit darker skin. So you can color her in whichever combination you would like. I will color the skin and hair for all 3. And then we'll just choose one to color the dress, and you can color the other girls later on for future projects. But we'll focus on her dress and flowers just for one of the girls for today's class. So I'll go ahead and set aside my stamp and we'll get to coloring. So I thought we would start with the skin tones first, so that way you can decide when you're done which one you like best to continue coloring. So I'm going to actually zoom in my camera a little bit, and I will put a little piece of tape here so you can see my Olo markers. I have also given the color list to you, so I have all my markers here to the side. And oops, that's my white gel pen, which you also will need when we're done. I like to set up my colors so I have my different colors for the different shades on like separate markers. And the reason why is so that way if I want to do any tip to tip blending, or if I want to be able to go quickly between 2 shades, I'm not like flipping the marker around. I can just, use the dark at one time and then bring in the light. And you can even keep the caps off and be able to go back and forth. And having a full marker, I think, is easier than taking the time to cap it, turn it over, take off the cap, and move on. I just think it's a little more simple to have them on separate markers. You can also use the the adapter, so like to create the end of a marker if you don't want to put two colors on each side. So whatever works for you. But these are all the colors that I have listed. It doesn't look like a lot because it's got two colors on each side, but use what you have. If you don't have all the colors, that's okay. If you have different markers, just choose something that's a similar shade. I am a big advocate for these types of classes and making cards that they are for practice and for learning, and then you can watch the video again or on your own time make another card with the skills that you learned during this workshop. So let me get my markers set aside, and I will show you how I use a gel pen when I'm done as well. But let me get a little piece of paper, or not paper, some tape, so that way I can put my marker cap so you know what I'm doing. And I will zoom in here. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to start with our girls, and I'm going to start with some skin tone. So let's start with darker shades. For my darker skin tone, I actually do have those set up exactly opposite of how I just said, because my first set of Olo markers I ever purchased were a skin tone shade, because I wanted to test them out first to make sure I liked them, and I thought you can't go wrong with skin tones. You can always use skin tone colors. So I like to start with the darkest shade and move on to the lighter. A lot of the images that we're coloring today will just have two shades. Some will have three. I'm trying to think on top of my head, did I have three when I colored these before filming? And I think some are three, not a lot, some are three. Or what I've done is using two shades, and I'll do tip to tip blending, especially when there is a big jump between color shades. So like for example, let me find some shades we're going to be using for our cottage. 4.7 to 4.4 is a really big difference. You can see already, the dark to light coloring between these two. There's a big jump. So I'm going to show tip to tip blending and how you can pick up some of the darker ink and use the lighter marker to color with. So I'll get there, but for the most part, I'm using two shades. A couple times we'll have three, but a lot of our images have a lot of detail, and there's already shading in some of our images, which is a huge help when you're coloring shading, to already have an image that gives you an area of where to start your shade. But we're going to jump into our darker skin and hair color, and you can make a combination. Maybe you really like the dark hair that looks like you with lighter skin. So if you want to stamp more of her out, you can definitely do that. But I'm going to show dark hair in a darker skin tone, and I'm going to start with OR 3.8. So I'm going to use the strands in her hair as the guide of where I'm going to color. And again, I'm going to follow the shadow of where her hair is. You can see around her ear, it's a little darker, and you know that shadow is going to be a little bit more under her neck, under her chin, behind her neck. So that's where I'm going to focus the darker shade. Now, some additional things about Olo markers before we get to coloring. The way that they are created is that you hold them at an angle and use the side of your brush. So it's very much like a painting feel. They are not designed to be held straight up and down for long periods of time. The way that the ink is inside of the canister, the marker, it will start to do a heavy pour. So if you notice a lot of ink building up, it's looking very shiny, I would recommend always having a piece of scrap paper, which I don't have and I should get. So having a piece of scratch paper nearby to be able to just wipe off your marker and get some of that ink out before it overwhelms your marker and you get a big blob. It's happened to me many times. I thought at first it was how I had bad markers, but I went to a class with Olo and I learned that they are intended to be more coloring on the side of the marker depending on how much ink you want, and not so much straight up and down. So just keep that in mind when you're using Olo markers. So if you see me come off to the side and just like make a little swiggle of my ink on the scrap paper, that's all I'm doing. I'm just trying to release some of that ink that's building up in our nib. I also, if I need to clean off a marker when I do tip to tip, I'll just come and clean it off by getting some of that darker ink off on my scrap paper. So, and another thing to learn about Olo markers is that let me get my color chart. Here we go. You can see here, they have different colors chart, and the first number, hue saturation, so for OR 3.8, OR is the color family, which is like an orange red or red orange. The 3 is the hue, which means it has a mid saturation. And the H is the value. So it's the value of the amount of, I want to say like darkness or grayness of the like light to dark. So 3 is the hue and 8 indicates that it is a darker or like a lower saturation of the alcohol, the like colorlessness of it, the gray. So 8 is definitely going to be dark, where things more like 0 and 1 and 2 are going to be more on the lighter. They have more of what would be just the 0, the blending of the alcohol. Okay, so let's get into coloring now. I'm gonna again start with my girl's hair, and I'm gonna do my best to keep my marker on its side. If I do need to go up on the point a little, it's okay. But I just want to make sure I am not gonna let that ink build up in my marker. And I'm just adding the darkest color again where there are shadows. So I'm coming in where it tucks behind her ear, and then also closer to the back side of her neck and chin area. And then for hair, the top of the hair, I usually make that a dark point as well. So I'm just going to now go from the center of the hair and out. And I've left some white space to be able to bring in my next color, which I'm just going a little lighter, and that's 3.7. And I am going to add it to the white and then also blend a little with my dark color that I've already added. And that way I get a little mix between the two, but I also keep some of that dark shadow color on the hair. There's not a lot of space, so not a lot to color here. Now for the skin, I'm not going to go quite as dark for 3.8. I'm going to go 3.7 and 3.4, and like there's a pretty good jump between the two colors, right? So we're going to do a little bit of tip to tip blending for her face as well. So let's start with 3.7. And I'm going to start with her legs. So the shadow is going to be mostly coming from under her skirt. So I'm going to bring in that darkest color there. And then I'll get my 3.4 ready. And I'm going to pick up color, just literally the tip to tip, pick up color, and then start bringing that onto the paper to be a better mid-tone between the two shades. Clean off my marker and then fill in the rest. And that gives a bit of a better blend between the two colors. And let's repeat that for the arms. I'm going to put a little bit darker shade here where her arm is going to go behind her dress. And then I'll put a little bit here where the basket is, a little bit dark by the edge of her sleeves. And then I'm going to do tip to tip again, pick up some of that color, and just blend out of the areas that I added that darker color. Okay, clean off my tip, and now it's that light color again, and finish coloring in her arms. And let's do the same for the neck. So I'm going to add the darker color under her chin. I'm going to bring the lighter color to be a mid-tone. Clean off my marker and finish coloring in her neck and her upper shoulder area. And then for her face. Now for faces, I do tend to go a little lighter, especially more towards the center of the face. So I'm going to be pretty light with my darkest shade 3.7. I'm going to go kind of in the middle of her ear, just at the hairline, and then maybe a little bit here on the side of her face. Now I know a lot of colorists out there outline the whole face with a darker color. I, again, really like to stick to 2 to 3 shades for coloring. I think it looks so pretty, but this is just how I like to color. And again, in today's class, these aren't, official coloring tips. This is just how I like to color. And so if that brings you joy of how I color as well, I hope I can, just give you some tips today. I'm also going to bring in a little bit of dark color at her nose, and then bring that color out a little more with this lighter one. I'm going to clean off the tip again and then color in the rest of her face. And I'm going to be careful because the art is so beautiful. So I am definitely holding my marker at much more of a pointed tip. And I'm being careful to leave white around the eyes. Okay. And there we go. We have our first skin tone done with dark brown hair. You could definitely do, Olo has some great red grays. I think I have one out. This is definitely a lighter gray, lighter shade, but I love to use red grays for black hair. I think it looks really nice. Okay, so let's go on to more of a mid-tone. I'm actually going to keep very similar shades. I'm going to do 4.4 and 4.2 this time around for the skin. And let's keep the same. Let's do 3.7 and 3.4 for the hair. So very similar hair as we did for her skin tone. I'm going to color her hairs because I want it to be not quite as dark brown. I want a little bit lighter brown. So I'm doing the exact same technique of making the hair darkest around the ears. And then also behind the neck and chin, and then the top of the hair. And if you notice, I stamp on smaller pieces of paper so I can twist and turn. I feel most confident coloring like brush, I guess something like a brush stroke or a flick, but going out. So when I want that look, I just turn my paper and I'm able to have that same motion for the other side just by rotating my paper. Okay, I'm going to bring in that 3.4, and just similar to how I did to our other girl, we're just going to fill in that white, and I'm overlapping the dark color just a bit to blend between the two. Okay, there we have some a little bit lighter brown, maybe more of like my color hair, like a little bit dirtier brown. And then for skin tone, I'm going to start with 4.4, and very similar to how I did our first girl, I'm going to add the darkest shade to, oops, see, I got a little bit of a blurb there. That's okay. I'll show you how I fix that with a white marker. And then even 4.2 to 4.4 is quite a big jump. So I'm going to use 4.2 to pick up 4.4 and do a tip to tip mid-tone blend. Clean off my marker and then color in the rest. Okay. And if it's too light, you can always, add in a little bit more and blend it out. You can always add more. It's a lot harder to take it away. So now I will do the arms. So adding shadow first. And then I'm going to do the tip to tip. Create a mid-tone. Wipe it off. And then fill in that lightest color. Let's do the neck area. And you can see I like having my caps off and being able to just go from one marker to the other. It just makes coloring a little quicker and easier. And keep it pretty the dark to the edges of her face. Gonna pick up that mid-tone. And if I'm coloring faster than you do, that's part of why I also wanted to show 3 different shades today. So that way you can focus on one. You could pause my video if you need to and just focus on one combination that you like the most, or that, you know, whoever your girl is inspired from. And there we have more of a mid-tone color, hair and skin. And so if you color out of the lines, which I do often, I grab my white gel marker and I just color over it. Now you could use the 0 marker and attempt to push the color back into where you, like back inside the lines. I don't really do that very often. I am okay if it happens because I just use, oops, that's my chisel point one. I just use I guess I'll just use my chisel point one to show. So I went out of the lines a little bit here on the hair. So I'm just going to like push that color into the line and it will dry back. But I am not a perfectionist when it comes to my coloring. If I go outside the line, I just take a white gel pen and color over it. Honestly, you can't really tell. That's just how I color, and I hope that inspires you to know that does not have to be perfect by any means. Okay, let's go to our third girl, and I'm going to color her with an even paler skin tone. And then we will do blonde hair. I didn't do an extra one for red hair, so forgive me. If you would like to see red hair, I can give you some pointers. Just let me know. I will give the information to Not Too Shabby, and I'll add them to the supply list for marker colors. Okay, so now for my palest friend here, which is my skin tone, I'm going to use a combination of 2.2 and 2.0 mostly. Yes, those are the colors I'm going to use. So again, we're going to start with the darkest color and bring in our lighter color as well. And I'm going to start with the legs. I'm going to bring in yellows for the blonde. So I'm going to finish up here with my skin tone marker colors. And then we will bring in, oops, let's do a little tip to tip. We'll bring in some yellow colors for the hair. She is our pale friend here. So adding the color to the darkest areas, tip to tip method for the mid-tone, and then using the lighter color just to blend that out. Repeat that for her neck. And I will say the more that you color, the more confident you get with it. I just recommend, oops, almost a tip to tip. I would recommend doing like coloring challenges. I think that's a fun way to get more comfortable with coloring. I just noticed that, and again, I don't consider myself to be professional colorist by any means, but I just have found that the more I do it, the more confident I become in it, and I think the better my coloring gets, especially as you develop a coloring style. Like I said, I know I don't do things the same way as everyone else, but this is just how I like to color, and that's what brings me joy. So that's how I am sharing my coloring today. So there we have our very pale friend with my skin tone colors. Those are the ones I grab the most for myself or for like my daughter when I feel inspired to color things that look like her. And let's get out our yellow colored markers. I prepped everything but my yellow markers, so let me get that ready. And I think we're gonna do let's do these two colors. And again, I'm going to break my rule of having separate colors. You know what? I will show you how you can add these guys to them. So I'm going to use a dark and a medium color because I think like blondes, they're not just, you know, yellow hair. They have depth to them for a lot of blondes. Everyone has such different hair. Okay, so you can add these to them as well. So I'm going to use YO 2.7, which is a yellow orange, and YO 2.3, and we're going to use this darkest color to, yes, okay. There is actually a mid-tone 2.5, but we're going to start with 2.7. Let's see how this looks. And I'm just adding, again, this will be 3 shades. So just a little bit to the same areas we colored before. Around the ears, under the neck and chin, and then here at the top of the hair. And I wasn't going to do a mid-tone, but I think I am. I think we're going to do it. So let's put our 2.7 aside and bring out 2.5. And I'm just going to treat this like I did the tip to tip. I'm just adding it, overlapping the darker color just a bit, but coloring mostly in the white area. And then we'll bring in the lightest shade, 2.3, and I'm just going to fill in that open area of white and overlapping the mid-tone just a little bit. There we go. We have some blonde hair. All right. So now you can choose which of the 3 girls you enjoyed coloring the most. If you have somebody in mind that you want to give this to. I'm going to continue on with this girl because it's all on one page, but I'm going to save these for future cards. We can definitely use them for more projects. Okay, so let's jump into new colors. Some non-quite skin tone colors. I think it would be fun to start with our cottage. So let me get out my cottage colors. I am using 2.7 and 2.5, and that's going to be the chimney. I wanted to give it like an orangey brick look. And then I'm going to bring in a red gray 5 for the top of our chimney, the little I don't know what that's called, spouts of the chimney. Forgive me, I don't know my chimney anatomy. And then I'm going to bring in the colors that are actually on the other side of my markers to color in the rest of our cottage, like the browns of our cottage. We're going with a very kind of traditional cottage colors. All right, so let's start with our chimney. So I'm going to use two shades. We're going to start with the darkest shade, 2.7, and then we also have 2.5. And I like to open my markers away from my images, so I'm going to be off camera because I'm zoomed in a bit. And that's just because if any buildup on my nib has happened and I flick the nib by accident with the edge of my cap, I don't want it on my beautiful coloring. So again, we're going to start with 2.7. So I'm going to follow the design that's already there. Again, I love these images already have some shading and shadow. So I will just add that depth to the edges of the chimney. I'm just bringing in little flicks because it is still a pretty small area to color. And then I'm going to go on the other side. And then I'm just going to bring in a little bit of color where those lines are outside of my side edges. And then we'll bring in 2.5 and I'm just gonna color the rest in. I am gonna overlap what I've already colored. Again, this is a really small area, so if you overlap a little, that's fine. And I get this nice kind of orangey red brick color. It's more orangey. I mean, I am using O, so definitely more orangey, but I wanted it to have more of a brick color. And I'm going to repeat those same colors for the top of the chimney here. So just using the darker color and then filling in the white with the lighter. Okay, I'm going to go and put these colors away. We're going to bring them later again for our rooster. And then let's bring in that, oops, I don't want to go too far because I need the browns. We're going to bring that RG, that red gray 5. And for the top of these, I'm just using one color. We're not going to go too crazy with shadowing on those tiny little images. They already have great shadow detail from the image itself. All right, moving on to the roof, I'm going to bring out OR 4.8 and OR 4.7. These are very close in color, so I don't need to do much blending between the two. They're going to blend together quite nicely. And starting with 4.8, I'm going to add this one color to under the roof here. There's already that texture from the image, so I just want to color that dark area under the roof. And then I'm going to go a little bit from the bottom and a little bit from the top for the side. And I'm going to repeat that for the other side of the roof. A little bit on the bottom, a little bit on the top. I'm going to add the darkest color under our roof again to the side here, being careful not to get my leaves pure brown. And then similar to how I colored my chimney, I'm going to add to the sides here the darkest shade. And then you can see this design from the stamp itself. There's some shadow behind the chimney, so I'll follow that. And then I'm going to add a little bit here on the top as well. And then we'll just bring that color in just a little bit, the top and bottom. Again, there really wouldn't be a ton of shadow here, so I'm just adding a little extra color following the lines on the roof shingles. Is that what you call roof pieces? Let me know down below. And then I'm going to bring in OR 4.7 and just color that in. Color in the rest. Now the OR, because it is an orange red, it does look very brown, but there is some nice red hue to it because of the R in OR. And I think that that matches the chimney color really nicely. It kind of like ties in, gives it that same little bit of an orangey, red orangey feel. All right, so I'm going to finish coloring in my roof. I'm going to bring it a little bit to a point just to color around the leaves, just being mindful not to keep it at a point for too long. There we have our roof. I am going to now bring out OR 4.4 as well. And I'm going to put my caps on. And for the door, I'm going to, oops, here we go. For the door itself, because it is a little bit, I want the door to be a little darker, but not as dark as my roof. So I still have all my OR 4s here. So I'm going to focus on 4.7 and 4.4. So not going to have that dark brown anymore, but I still want it to be a little darker. And again, there's a big jump between OR 4.7 and 4.4. So we're going to do a little tip-to-tip blending there. So I'm going to start with OR 4.7, and I'm going to add the darkest color at the bottom of the door and the top of the door. So just starting where I would think there would be the most shadow. I'm going to bring out a little bit of extra color following the details of the wood planks on the door. I'm going to take my 4.4, do some tip-to-tip, pick up that 4.7, and then blend that out towards the center. Do the same for the top of the door. Clean off my marker on my scrap, and then fill in the rest with my lightest shade of 4.4. Okay, that will finish off 4.7. And then my last one is that 4.2, and even 4.4 to 4.2 is kind of a jump there, but I'm going to start with my darkest color and add shadow first. So same thing I've been saying this whole time. I'm going to start adding my shadow where I think items around it would be casting a shadow. So where the roof meets the cottage, just going to add the color there. And then I'm going to follow the design of the stamp, bringing color over some of these lines that kind of just add to the shadow and dimension of the house. Coming along the side here, where this side of the house meets the grass. I'm going to come around. I'm going to add maybe a little bit of shadow here along the side of the window frame. And let's actually fill in completely the door frame. And then up the side of the house, being careful not to get my leaves. So I'm going to just start with this area, and I'm going to fill in the rest with the 4.2. If you feel like that's too big of a jump, you can pick up some of the 4.4 with the 4.2, and that will just, give you a little bit more of a mid-tone color between the two. And when I color, with alcohol ink, it has alcohol in it, and alcohol does evaporate. So I don't like to color too much ahead of, with one shade. This is a big area, so I'm trying to be quick so that way I can still have plenty of time to blend with the dark shade that I've already added before the alcohol evaporates and just leaves the color behind. So then we'll just fill in this last little area. So that's why I don't color, everything on this house at once. I'm just going back and adding where I think it needs to be a better blend. And now let's do the side of the house. So I'm going to add my darkest shade under where the roof meets and down the back side of the house. Again, keep in mind the beautiful flowers. And then I'm going to color a little bit around here, like the flowers are giving some shadow to the side of the house. And then my marker's at a tip, so I'm going to come over here and just clean it off a little. And let's do a little more tip-to-tip blending. And bring out that shadow a little bit more so we have a better blend between the two colors. And I clean off my marker and add that light shade. And that creates our beautiful cottage. Let's color with the darker shade 4.4 our window sill as well. Not window sill, sorry, window frame. So I'm going to do the edges. And I'm going to use the same color and do the details of the different panes as well. I know my marker is at a bit of a tip to color that in, so just keep that in mind. And then for the windowsill where the flowers are, I am going to bring back the mid color, that 4.7, very similar to the door. And I'm going to add the darkest shade on the very edge of the windowsill and then do tip to tip to finish coloring in that windowsill. It was a little dark, so I'm going to clean that off. And that way it matches the door a little bit. It's a little bit darker. Okay, so now that we've done the cottage, let's do the windows. So for the windows, I'm just going to bring in this really light shade of blue. I went kind of back and forth on this because obviously it's probably darker inside of the cabin or the cottage, but I wanted it to have a more light and cheery, like the sun and sky are reflecting on the window. So I'm going to use B 2.0, which is a very pale blue. And I'm just going to go in and color in those panes of glass. Because I thought, you know, maybe it should be like a gray color because it's dark inside the cabin or the cottage because she's going to be outside tending to her flowers. But I wanted it to look more like a cheerful card, so I am just coloring with that blue. And I did go back and add a little bit more color just on one side of the panes. I'm like adding more color to give it a little bit more depth. Instead of bringing in a different shade, I just go back with the same color. Now let's move on to the flowers around our cottage. So for the green that I'm using for the flowers and the grass, I'm going to use my G 1.7 and 1.5. These are the two darker shades for the leaves. And then the grass, I'm going to do 1.4 and 1.5. So I'm going to start with 1.7 and 1.5. And I'll have those out and ready. So I'm going to start with my darker shade, and I'm only going to do a few leaves at a time. Like I said, I don't like leaving my darkest shade without blending for very long. So I'm just going to pick a leaf here and add some of the darker color at more of the base of the leaf and just color a few of those in. And then we'll switch over to the 1.5 and fill in the rest of the leaf. There is not a big difference. I don't think a 1.6 or a tip-to-tip blend, well, there is no 1.6 right now, but I don't think a tip-to-tip blend is necessary. I'm going to use the lighter color to fill in the branch part. I actually missed a little spot in my house, but let's just grab 4.4 and I'm just going to put a little bit of color there. And now let's color more leaves. So I'm going to go back to the 1.7, do some more leaf, adding it more towards the base of the leaf. And then 1.5 to color in the rest of the leaf. These are tiny. If you really wanted to just do one color, you completely can. Some of these leaves are super duper small, like this little tiny little peeking out right there. Let's just do one color. That does not need any shading. And then do the last of the leaves on this side and color those in. And also anywhere where I see stems, branches, that looks like it should be a leaf. Okay, and then we'll repeat this for the other side of the house. So I'm gonna just darken up the leaves and then add in a lighter color, as well as filling in the stems and branches. This, I would say, I know I was an advocate for like staying in the lines, but if you can, try to stay in, especially on areas where you've already colored. So that, I think, is the hardest part. Oh, I didn't need to add shadow there. Those are so tiny. Okay, I am done with the 1.7. I'm actually going to do the lighter color first for the grass. And then I'm going to bring in the darker one. And I'll, just because I want to fill in this grassy area first. And then I'm going to follow the details of the stamp where there already is grass and shadow with the darker color. And I'm going to repeat that for the other side, just adding in the color of the grass and then bringing in the darker shade and following in the design. You could do either way first. All right, so that will finish off 1.5. I'm going to still use a little bit more of this 1.4 to add in some green actually onto the house, so it looks like there's grass kind of rising up and creating shadow on the house. All right, let's move on to our little walkway here, and for that I'm gonna use, what should I use? What did I have planned? I'm gonna use we're gonna do 7.1 and 7.3. So these are O's, so still kind of in the orange area, but it has more of that different hue with the 7 and the saturation of 3 and 1, so definitely on the lighter side. So we're going to start with 7.3, and I'm going to add the darkest to where the door meets our path, and then I'm going to follow the edges. And then similar to how I did the house, anywhere where I see some of these line details, I'm going to add more of the dark color. And then I'll grab my 7.1 and fill in the open area and overlap a bit to get a nice blend. Okay. And now the fun, pretty part of our roses. We are going to color those with some R's. We have R 5.5 and 5.3. And I'm not going to do much blending with these either because, or like tip to tip blending. There is a little bit of a jump, but honestly, I really like the contrast of these two colors for the roses. So I'm going to start with 5.5 and I'm just going to color the center of all of our roses. And for some of these larger ones, you can kind of come out a little more. Actually, I think let's add a little bit more on this one. This is kind of a big flower. Some of those extra petals on the outside. And then 5.3, I'm going to finish coloring in the rest of the flowers. Again, while the flowers themselves are large, the petals aren't very large. So you don't need a lot of blending between the two. If you want more of a change and a blend between the two colors, you can repeat that same tip to tip method to be able to get more of a mid-tone color. But I think they look so pretty just like that. Let's also use the same lighter color, and I'm just going to kind of tap my marker to fill in the flowers at the windowsill. And I'm going to bring back our RG5 that I used at the top of the chimney to color the door handle. And we have our first completed image. It's so pretty. I love it a lot. I hope you love it too. Now let's move on to our butterfly. I was going back and forth on what colors to color the butterfly. I mean, it's a butterfly. You could color it any color, really. But I decided that I wanted to go with a blue butterfly. So I'm going to color the body of our butterfly first with RG5. It's very teeny tiny. You don't need any shadowing. Just add that center of the butterfly, the body. Again, I don't know my anatomy of bugs. I'm going to use B2.2 and B2.0 to color in my butterfly. And there is, again, kind of a large jump between the two. And I'm going to use this darkest shade just towards the center of my butterfly wings. I'm going to do a little tip to tip to color that out. I'm actually going to color in the smaller wings just with that method. And then I'm going to go about half. I guess that would be another third. I'm going to clean off my marker off the side here and then finish coloring in the last third of that butterfly. I just felt like it needed to be blue. I don't know. I didn't feel like orange really matched the vibes of what I was going for, so I just think I really like the blue. Okay, now let's move on to our sweet little lamb, which is going to be very easy because our lamb is going to be white, but not white because I don't like coloring white or black. I think that there needs to be more depth and shadow than just using white or black. So for my white, I'm going to use warm grays. I'm going to use a warm gray 1 and a warm gray 0. And I love using warm grays for animals, red grays for hair or people, and then cool grays for inanimate objects is kind of more what I do, like rocks or something. So warm grays for our lamb. Now our lamb is furry with very like kind of curly, fur vibes that it has here in the design. So I'm actually not going to do a solid line to create shadow. I'm going to do a lot of dabbing. So here on my scrap paper, I'm going to, keep it up, not going to go straight up and down, a little bit of an angle, but I'm going to just dab the color. So it actually has more circular feel and more of a stippling look and not a solid line like following the design of our cottage. So I'm just going to bounce my marker and add the color. Does this really do a lot? I don't know. I think it does. And I'm going to spot out that color out a little bit. So I'm going right up to the line and then bringing it out a little. I just feel like it gives a different texture than if I were just to bring in a solid line. And I'm just following where, again, the bottom and creases of our little lamb, because that's where there would be the most shadow. And let's add in a few dots here and there just to create a little more shadow. We'll do the tail, and that's a lot of color. So let's now bring in the lighter color, and I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to completely color in my lamb. Now it looks dark because of the alcohol. It looks like it's going to be a weird gray color, but that's just because of the saturation of the amount of alcohol in here versus color. And when the alcohol evaporates, it's actually going to have a very nice, soft, warm gray tone to it. So the same thing I did for the body, I'm going to repeat for my little lamb's face. I'm not going to put too much near the eyes, and I'm going to go up the nose, very similar to how I colored my human. And then repeat that to color in the face with the warm gray 0. And just gonna finish coloring his face. And I'm actually gonna bring it on the ear here on the bottom. I didn't fully color in the ear because I'm going to bring in a red. I'm going to bring in R0.2, which is a very pale pink color, and I'm just going to color in the ears, like the inside of the ears. And then because, you know, it's an animal, I know I haven't done it to my people yet. I will add rosy cheeks if that's what you like to add. But I like adding rosy cheeks to my animals too. So we'll add a little pink to the cheeks. And let's color in, I imagine that's his little tongue sticking out. So we're going to color in his tongue. For the hooves, I'm going to bring in Warm Gray 7, which is not quite black, but a very dark gray. And color in the little hooves of my lamb. I'm not doing any shadowing for these, just darkening those up. And oh my gosh, he looks so cute. Just like that. Let's move on to our rooster. Now our rooster's going to have a few fun colors. If you want this to be more of a chicken than a rooster, you can use the same colors except for the blue feathers that I'm going to add to the tail. But let's start with our rooster brown feather. So if you want to make this a chicken, you can use these colors without the blue. And I'm going to bring in first, yes, 2.7 and 2.5. So the same colors that I used for my chimney. And my sun is setting a little bit, so let me or the sun's moving, I guess I should say. Just twist my blinds a little, get that glare out of the way. I'm going to start again with a darker shade, and I'm going to add the darkest color at the bottom or like the ends of the feathers here. I'm not going to go too high, but just flicking on that color. And I'm going to turn my image around and also do it from the top where the eye is. And then let's bring in the lighter color, and I'm going to overlap just a little bit to blend those two together, and then color in the rest. And then I want to have a little bit more definition of my feather, so I'm going to bring in this dark color again, and I'm just going to flick on a few, just bring that back in. I just want a little bit more definition of where the feathers are. And I'm going to use the same color combination for the wing of my rooster. So I'm only going to add the darkest color at the edge of the feathers. So I'm going to go a little bit longer with my flicks or strokes, depending on what you want to call that hand movement of adding color. And then bring in the lighter color again, going kind of overlapping just a little bit to create a blend. And then coloring in the rest. I'm not going to go too far into the stomach area. And I'm going to bring back that dark color and just kind of do a little bit more controlled flicks to just give those feathers more definition. For the body of the rooster, I want to do 4.7 and a tip to tip to create something in between my 4.7 and 4.4. So let me get those ready. And I'm going to add these colors to the stomach and the leg part of my rooster. And I'm only going to go up to maybe like this far. So just like where the leg is. So I'm going to start with my darker shade of 4.7, and I'm going to add, I'm just going to color in his back leg because you're not really going to see much of that. And I'm going to just flick on, kind of like how we tucked behind the ear, tuck where the feathers kind of meet here. Okay. And then I'm going to do tip to tip. So pick up some of that 4.7 with my 4.4, and I'm going to color in the rest of my rooster. I just wanted to add a different shade of brown, just give it different feather colors. Color in, I'm gonna go, like I said, to right about there. You could use the same colors. You definitely don't have to mix it up. I just wanted to give them different shades of brown. And then for fun, we're going to add some teal and blue, or like blue gray colors, to our rooster's tail. And I think I'm going to bring in, nope, that's it, these three colors. So I'm going to start with BG 2.7. and BG 2.5 and very, very little of BG 2.3. And I'm going to show you that that's actually more of a blending that I'm going to do. And you know what? I will bring in B 4.6, depending on how this turns out. Because we're going to start with our darkest color. Oh, you know what? Not BG, not B4. I want BG 0.8. So I'm actually going to unscrew this. And we're going to switch these. Because I like my markers, like I said, the colors I'm using to be on different markers. Easy to switch. Okay, I'm going to start at 2.7. So 2.7 is here. And what's nice is that if you don't have the cap on, you can read the label. And I'm going to start from the closer to the body of the chicken and out away towards the end of the feathers. And just going to add a little bit like that. And then I'm going to bring in 2.5 and I'm going to blend the rest of that out. I'm going to almost fill in all the feathers. I'm going to leave just a teeny tiny bit at the tip. And then I remember when I colored this the first time, I wanted some more blue because I felt like it was a little too teal. So I'm going to bring in that 0.8 and just add in some of that definition of the feathers and just blue up. Because I think the feathers, if you look at a rooster, are a little more blue than green when it comes to the teals. So brought in that blue color. And then, oh, nope, let's bring in the lightest, 2.3. And I'm going to just fill in the edge of those feathers. And then I don't want this weird jump between the brown and the blue green. So I'm taking this lightest color and I'm just going to blend a little bit of those together. And I feel like it just softens and it changes from the brown to the green a little more. There, I think that looks pretty good. So I'll go ahead and cover up my markers. And let's do more details on our rooster. Of course, we got to bring in the red. I'm just going to use one shade, R0.5, to color in the, I need to learn my bird anatomy before I start coloring birds. But the red areas of the rooster. And then I'm going to bring in OR 1.1 to just color in the beak, the feet, and I guess legs of our chicken or rooster or chicken, depending on how you color this. Let's move on to our final image together, and that's going to be our sweet girl tending to her roses. And we're going to bring in some colors that we've already colored with. We're going to use the same shades of brown that we used earlier for the house to color in her shoes and the basket. So I'm going to use the lightest shades, 4.4 and 4.2. And I'm going to, just making sure I'm still in frame. We are going to take 4.2 and, or sorry, 4.4 and color in the edges of our basket, the bottom of our basket, and the handle of our basket. And then use the lighter color to finish coloring in the basket. There's a lot of details. I don't feel like tip-to-tip method is necessary because there's just a lot of detail on there. And let's do the shoes. I'm going to color in the bottom of the shoes and the sides and back, and then like the sides of the way this shoe is. And then we'll do tip to tip to color in the rest of her shoe. Okay. For her, let's do the dress part. And for that, I'm going to use B 4.6 and B 4.3. And there is a pretty big jump between those two. So I'm going to start with 4.6 and I'm going to add the shadow first. So I'm going to add to the tops of her dress, the straps. And then there's shadow. You could see from the image of the dress where it meets the belt. So we'll use that as a guide to add shadow. And same with going out the other way. Okay. And then we will use it at the bottom of her skirt. And I'm going to use like the little pleats as a guide. I'm not going to go all the way to the edge of this front pleat. I left a little bit of white on the sides, and that's to give it more of a rounded look. We're going to add in a lighter color there. So because the 4.6 to 4.3 is a large jump, I'm going to pick up color and I'm going to blend it out. Create a nice mid-tone. And we're going to finish doing that to all of the areas that I just colored. Do more of a mid-tone here near the flower part of her dress. And then finally that mid-tone on the top part. Okay, and I'm going to clean off my marker and color in the rest of the dress. You can see how that lighter bit on that pleat, it just gives it kind of like a more round look. That's what I do for balloons as well. It just gives it more of a curved look to it. Now she has her cute little denim dress on, and we're going to color her shirt to match her roses. So we're going to use R5.5 and R5.3. So I'm going to start with the darkest shade. I'm going to color in her belt, and I'm going to color fully in her edges of her sleeves. And then we'll finish coloring in the belt with the light. Switch back to our darker shade here. I'm going to follow the design of the stamp to add in shadow with the R5.5 and then color in the rest with 5.3. And then let's color in her flowers while we have these out. So similar to how I colored the roses on the cottage, I'm just adding the darker color to the center of the flower, and there's lots of little images here, so I'm just going to dab the lighter color in case, I don't want to accidentally smear any of my black ink. It has dried for a little while, but sometimes the lighter the color, the more it can smear your ink. I don't know why that is. I think it's just the alcohol in the ink. It happens. And then let's bring back in those same greens from earlier, our 1.7 and 1.5. There's just a few leaves to color in, not too many. So I'm going to think these are and these are so tiny. We don't even need 2 shades here, but we're gonna do it. And I think anywhere where I see like, I'm gonna color over a few of the petals that I colored at the bottom here with the darker green, just to add a little bit more greenery to her basket. And that finishes her. Let's give her a little bit more details on her face. So I'm gonna start with, I'm gonna give her green eyes because I have green eyes. So I'm gonna bring in 8.5. And there's a teeny tiny little bit of area where you could color her eyes in. Now, for my darker skin tone, if you want to make rosy cheeks, I would actually grab our 0.3. And I'm just going to dab it on the cheeks. Let's see. I think this would be good for the mid-tone as well. It's a little dark. If, if it's a little dark, that's okay. Bring in the lighter shade, 0.2, and go over it. And there you go. Softens it a little. And then for my blonde girl here, she's pretty pale, 0.2 is plenty to give her some cheeky details. And then for her lips, we're going to bring back in 5.5, and I'm going to give her some really pretty rosy pink lipstick. And there we go. We've colored in all of our images. I do want to show you how you can use the white gel pen. So I think I did a pretty good job coloring in the lines. I'm pretty impressed. But I do love a good white gel pen to create cute little cheeks on my critters. I guess I didn't give my rooster a cute cheek. Let's bring in 0.3. I'm literally just gonna like dab it on there. You can't even see it, to be honest, but that's okay. And I'm gonna add, we'll come back to that, give it a second to dry. I'm gonna add a little white dot to the cheeks of my animals. I just really love doing this. Cheeks of my human here, cheek to my rooster. Now, if you want to add more highlights, you can. Here is a card that I made with my girl. I used more of a lighter denim color to match the paper that I have here, but you can see I've added some highlights to her hair, her dress, her flowers, the shoe. It just depends on how much you want to do. I also made this card where I added highlights to my stationery objects as well. But I just wanted to show you how I add my cheeks. I'm not going to add any more highlights right now. We'll see when we get to our card making how we feel. But I'm going to clean up and I will zoom back out so that way we can get to building a simple card layout, because today's class was focusing more on the coloring and less so much about card technique. But let me get zoomed out here and we'll move on to the card making. All right, we have our dies. I've already cut apart most of them, not all of them, which I should have done as part of my homework. But let me get the ones out. Okay, dropping them everywhere. Okay. And I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine. And I'm just going to use a little bit of repositionable tape to keep these in place. And do my best to get this lined up nicely. Get all of my images cut out. I definitely prefer coloring before die cutting. I don't know how everyone else feels. I feel like, I don't know, it's easier to color on a sheet versus little tiny images. You definitely can color after you've die cut. I just find this to be a little easier to maneuver. So we'll get all of these die cut out at one time. Just using the tape to make sure when I run it through my die cutting machine that they don't move. Let's do one more. It's kind of a larger die. All right, and I have a electric die cutting machine, so just right off here to the side. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this through. Okay, pop out our images. Oh, there's my rooster. My cute girl. Oop, that one moved a little, but she still looks good. Little lamb. And my cottage. And we're doing very simple layouts. I'm going to follow the layouts that I've done with my cards so far. So just some easy trimming. Let's pick a pattern paper to be, I kind of like how I have the pattern as a background. So I want to choose one that will help build up my cottage scene. There's just so many to choose from. I had such a hard time even just for like creating some of my samples here. I really just didn't know which ones to do. There's so many pretty papers. I actually really like this one. Let's do that one. And then if you ordered early and got the linen sheet, if not, grab a gingham or something on the more softer side. Let's do you want to do, I feel like that matches our cottage. Let's do that one. And I want to do one more kind of more subtle pattern. I do like the polka dot a lot, but I also like the pink gingham. No, I don't like that one as much for this card. We're creating on the go here. I do like that, but then I feel like this orange is too orange. Maybe let's do, should we do a green? No. Should we do pink? Brown? We could do brown. Yeah, let's do brown. All right, I will have to sort these after the class. And then we have a card base. Question is, do we want to build our scene? Let's do our cutting. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to trim down to my A2 size. I'm going to follow this one on. So this is A2 in size, so it's going to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm just going to trim that down by 5 1/2. And then I want about 1/8 of an inch all the way around. So I'm going to trim this one to be 4 by 5 1/4. So cutting off 1/4 inch on vertical and horizontal, and that just gives us a nice little border. And then I want to leave quite a bit showing. I do like how much this one's showing. So I trimmed this to be 2 3/4 by 4 inches. So let's do the same. 2 3/4 by 4 inches. Okay. And that gives us I just realized I should have built my scene before I trimmed that down, but that's okay. We're gonna go horizontally. Let me get a card base ready. I have one already trimmed, and I accidentally scored it funky, but that's okay. We're gonna use it. We don't go to waste here in the craft room. So 4 1/4. I was making a fun fold card and I scored it in the wrong spot, but that's fine. We're gonna cover it with our paper. No one will ever know unless you look really hard at the inside. Let's grab a tape runner. I'm going to tape the brown piece. Oh, I forgot it's two-sided. I think I like the darker brown. Let's see. No, the lighter brown I feel like fits the cottage more. Yeah, okay. Lighter brown. So I'm going to add adhesive to the darker linen color. And we'll go ahead and add this to our card base. And then we'll add, you know what? I'm going to pop this one up. So I'm going to grab some foam adhesive and we're going to, oh no, we're going to do that last. We're going to add this first. We're going to add the gingham to the center of our floral paper. So I'm doing my best here to use my grid so I can get this centered as possible. Looks pretty good. Okay, there's like more flowers here, so I'm gonna put on the bottom. And now we're gonna build our scene with foam adhesive. So I think like kind of the cottage there, our girl here, little lamb next to her, looking all cute and adorable. I think he should be more in front, like that. Oops. And then our little rooster and our butterfly. Oh my goodness, did I forget? I did forget to poke out my butterfly. Stuck in my die. I thought our butterfly could be kind of like distracting our, maybe I need to put our cottage here. I wanted the butterfly to look like it's distracting the chicken or the rooster a bit, but maybe we do it like that. That looks good. I like the layout. Okay, so now we're gonna grab foam adhesive and scissors, and I'm gonna get to cutting down foam adhesive, oops, to fit. I'm not using my scissors I like to use for foam adhesive. Okay, so let's start with our girl. And I'm just going to cut some foam to fit behind her. If you have like little foam squares, that probably would be easier. But I have a big old monster roll of foam adhesive, so I'm just going to trim pieces down to fit behind her. And I don't like to go too crazy with foam adhesive, but I like to make sure that there is good stability behind these images. And so I'm just gonna continue to add foam. And once you're happy with how much you have, we will peel off the release paper. and get her attached. I like to use a pokey tool when I'm trying to be quick at getting these off. Sometimes my nails are too short and I just like can't quite get the backing off. So I have one pokey tool that I use just for this purpose. So it gets a little gunky every once in a while from the adhesive, but I just cleaned it off. But that way I don't get gunky adhesive on other things that I need to poke out. All right, so we're going to add her just like this with her sweet critters. Let's add, I'm actually going to attach the house with regular adhesive because to create some dimension, the cottage is going to be a little further back, right? I mean, she would be like Alice, giant, if she were standing right next to the cottage. So our cottage is further away. So to create that dimension a little bit more, I'm going to just glue that right to the card front. Try to make sure my door looks straight. Okay. And now we can add our critters because it overlaps a little bit with the cottage. So I'm going to get some more foam adhesive and add this to my sweet little, making sure that my foam doesn't show through to the other side. Oops, a little too big. There we go. Do one more little piece here. It's a little big. Okay, let's save that for our butterfly. And again, we'll peel off the release paper. Oof, getting sticky fingers. We'll add our sweet little lamb to the scene. So cute. And then our rooster. Actually, we'll use this little piece for the rooster feet. And a little bit of foam adhesive for this guy. But as I finish this up, I hope that you guys learned something new today. I would love to know your thoughts on markers. Which are your favorite and why? Ooh. I'd love to know if you don't like coloring with markers. Maybe you prefer coloring with colored pencils or watercolor. I wish I colored more with watercolor. I get in these like phases. As you know, I've colored with watercolor before for Not Too Shabby last year or last event we did. But I've just been on a Olo marker kick, and so I haven't colored with them in a while. So let me know what your favorite coloring medium is. Let's do it like this. Cute. And then I wanted to pop this up. So let's get more foam adhesive, and I'm just gonna use these leftover pieces I have. Cut another chunk of my roll. Also, let me know your thoughts on foam adhesive. I love dimension on cards. I know that means we have to pay a little more to mail them, but I just love the way it elevates, I guess, literal pun intended, it elevates our cards. I've always been a big fan of foam adhesive. I do buy like extra ounce stamps from the post office so I can mail my big cards. But let me know if you're not a big foam adhesive person. And if you are not a big foam adhesive person, I'm just trying to shove this foam in anywhere where I have space here. Oh my goodness, it's too big still. You don't have to do foam. You could just glue all these together. There's plenty of dimension by, you know, overlapping our elements. As long as the house is, you know, further back in the scene, the house looks larger and further away. You can layer the rooster closer than the sheep by just adhering it in front of it a little bit. There are ways you can play with the dimension of your images on your card without using foam adhesive. But I love foam adhesive, so I use it often. All right, last little square here. And there are such great sentiments in this set, as well as the bloom die. So, you know, we could add bloom to the front of our card, but I'm going to stamp a sentiment on the inside. So let's grab our stamp set again, and I'm going to grab a pink ink. I'm using Hawthorne Rose, Versifying Claire, and I want to put "Thank you for making life so sweet." I think that's, oh, I love the "You're the rose in my garden of friends." Never mind that, let's use that one. That's one of my favorite sentiments in this set. I was trying to be different, but I love it too much, so we're going to use it again. And I am using a Versifying Claire, and I am a fan of these types of inks because I can usually get a very good stamp without using a tool like a Misty. You're the rose in my garden of friends. Lovely. And that finishes off our card today. I again hope you had fun coloring with me, and I hope that you learned some tips and tricks on using alcohol markers, obviously specifically Olos, but any marker, being able to blend different hues and shades together. But I hope, again, you learned something fun and that you have so much more fun the rest of this retreat and everyone's classes. I'm so excited to be back a part of the Not Too Shabby virtual retreat for Cottage Rose. And thank you again so much for joining me. Bye.
Sunlight shining, coffee's poured, papers stacked, we're ready for more. From coast to coast, near and far, we're crafting together wherever we are. Scissors snipping, glitter flies, stamps are inked and colors collide. Cottage rose, let's craft away, laughing, creating all through the day. Cut it, fold it, layer with style, handmade magic, share a smile.
Hey everyone, it's Joy here, and I'm going to be teaching this fun fold card for you guys today. I'm super excited about it. This is not my idea. Actually, I saw this on a YouTube channel called Simply Simple Stamping, but I just thought this was such a great fun fold card. So let's get started on this. I am starting with basically an A2 size, but it's an 8.5 by 5.5 piece of white cardstock, and you're going to score it at 4 1/4, which is going to create an A2 size card base. So this is one part of our fun fold. So then you score it, fold it using your bone folder is perfect, and now we have our A2 size card base. The next sheet measures 8 inches by 5 1/4 inches. You want this to be a little bit smaller, height wise than your A2 size. So then we're going to score this at the 2-inch mark, and then we're going to score this at the 4-inch mark. So essentially we're going to create a Z-fold card. So really what this fun fold card is an A2 size card base and a Z-fold card base, and we're going to put those together. So again, score that at 2 inches and 4 inches. Now, when we're putting this card together, I want the folds on the right-hand side. And the first fold, I'm going to fold away from myself, which is going to create this mountain. And I'm just making sure to line up that everything is nice and straight. And then I'm going to fold towards myself to create a valley. And I'm just using my bone folder to get those edges nice and crisp. So now we have our Z-fold card base. So super, super easy. So mountain and then valley. And then again, these folds are going to be on the right-hand side for our card design today. Let's get into getting some of our elements put together, and then we can start getting this fun fold card together. I am using this gorgeous, beautiful floral paper. This is from the Cottage Roses paper pad. You get 2 paper pads in the kit. And I want to distress the edges a bit. So I'm going to use my scissors. I'm going to do this a few times on some of our pieces here, but I really like this kind of fun, distressed, grungy look. So we're going to give this card a little bit of that. So just taking the scissors, roughing up the edges of our A2 size card panel. This is going to go on the front of our card, which will go on the front of the A2 size card panel. This is what we're going to be die cutting that window through. Now I'm also going to do some ink blending. So I'm getting my foam tool. You can use a blender brush, a foam tool, whatever you like to blend with. And I'm also going to be using the cute stencil that comes in this kit. I love that chicken wire stencil. But first I'm going to do a little bit of ink blending. I am using Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink, and I am going to go around the edges, definitely getting the areas that I just roughed up with the scissors. I want that to catch the ink, and then a little bit heavier in the corners. Now I think this Vintage Photo is so beautiful against this kind of tealish green patterned paper. I think it's so, so pretty. So now let's bring in that stencil. I want to do a little bit of stenciling on the front. I thought that would be a fun addition to add this extra pattern to this patterned paper. And obviously any of these design choices, these colors, whatever it is, you can change up for your own card, however it is that you want this to look. So I'm going to go around the edges, just lightly stenciling using that same Vintage Photo, and I think this just came out so pretty on this patterned paper. So I'm going to turn this around. You could tape this in place. I'm just holding it. It doesn't need to be perfect for this design here. So let me get that lined back up just a little bit, and again going around the edges. And we're going to use this stencil again in our design. Let me get around this other bottom part here, adding just a little bit more ink. And then we can lift this off, and now we have this fun stencil around the edges. Isn't that so pretty? Now I want to adhere this to the A2 size card base, because I'm going to use tape runner and liquid glue. I really want this to hold in place because we're going to be die cutting through it. I don't want any of it to pop off. So I'm going to adhere that to the card base first, and then we're going to work on some other pieces. I do want to wipe down my stencil, kind of clean up my work surface a little bit. I don't want to transfer ink where I don't want it. So let me get that adhesive here. So again, just some tape runner and then a little bit of liquid glue. I just really want to be extra safe. You don't have to do this. If you feel like you just want one layer of glue, that's totally fine. I'm just going to do a little bit of both. I like to do the tape runner because that's going to hold it down immediately, and then the liquid glue, you know, is so strong. So that's really going to hold everything you need into place. But I just needed to unclog mine there for a second. And let me make sure I don't have anything that's going to ruin my card base. And now I can add my liquid glue. And again, this is going to be adhered to the A2 size card base that we scored at 4 1/4. So this is your kind of your common card base. So let me put that in place. Trying not to get my fingers in the glue. And I'm going to place that down. Now, I did cut some other strips of patterned paper from that same Cottage Rose patterned paper pad, and I have 2 strips of the polka dot, like the pink and the green, which I think the polka dot pattern paper is so beautiful. And I have cut those 5 inches by 1 3/4. And then we have this oval here. Now, in the homework, I did talk about having a shaped die. It could be a circle, a rectangle, a triangle, whatever, square, whatever you want. I did these nested wavy oval dies, and I do think the nested dies work best for this because I'm going to need 2 sizes of this. This is my largest size. This is what's going to go in the front but be hooked to the back, I guess you could say. And so I also have a smaller piece that's a little bit smaller than that one that's die cut from white cardstock, and that was all in the homework for you guys, along with these 2 strips here. Now the opening I roughly measured. The largest opening for the front of the card base measures about 3 1/2 by 5. The smaller one measures about 3 by 4 1/2. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want 2 pieces, and you'll see why here in just a little bit. So roughing these guys up with the scissors, I want that same look basically on the inside of our card as we're going to have on the outside. And then I'm going to use the vintage photo to add a little bit of ink to the edges. Now on this oval, I want to add just the tiniest bit because I don't want to get rid of that kind of sand color polka dot pattern paper. I think it's so pretty. I still want to be able to see that when I have the smaller wavy oval on top of it. Now these pieces I can go a little bit heavier on. I am also going to bring in the stencil just on these 2 strips. These 2 strips are going to be adhered to the Z folds that we already created when we scored and fold at the 2 inch and 4 inch mark. So let's bring in that stencil. And again, just adding it a little bit to the sides, to the edges, however you want to do it. If you want to leave this part off, you totally can. I like to just having that little extra detail just to see that little bit of stenciling in the background. So I didn't do a ton, as you can see, but I still think it's super, super cute. I am just kind of digging the stencil on top of the pattern paper. Let's do the same thing to this like bluish green background, or greenish blue. It kind of reminds me of speckled egg, but it has a little more green to it. So this I'm just going to go in and stencil first and then kind of ink blend around the edges. Again, catching the areas where I took the scissors and roughed up that paper. I do also want to mention that the paper that I used for the card base and the Z-fold is a bit of a thicker paper. I wouldn't use a really thin paper on that. This was about 110 pound. I think you could get away with an 80-pound cardstock on that as well, but I would definitely go with something a bit thicker. Okay, now it's time to die cut the front of our A2 size card. This is going to have the window. So here is my largest oval die. So it's the same size as the one that I die cut from the polka dot tan paper. So we're going to die cut this, but we want to open up our card base because we don't want to cut through the back. I am going to center this in the front again with the largest shape die. So whatever shape die you decided. If you don't have a shape die, you could use like not a razor blade, but you guys know what I mean, to cut your paper through. X-Acto knife, that's the word. And you could just cut yourself a rectangle and then trim out a piece of paper or cardstock that's slightly smaller than the rectangle. So I have that centered. I am going to tape this down and I'm going to run this through my die cut machine. I don't need to run the whole thing through. So I'm going to show you here on my plates that I am just going to line it up and have the back half of the card kind of hang off the plates. And I'm using the Platinum 6 die cut machine from Spellbinder. So let me show you here. So see how that's just hanging off? That's how I'm going to run it through my die cut machine. And then it should just cut all the way through. That pattern paper is pretty thin. So using the 110-pound cardstock or 80-pound cardstock, it should die cut through both of them just fine. And then you could put that piece aside and use it. You could use that piece instead of the tan polka dot piece that I am going to use if you want the front to just be completely cohesive with the same pattern paper and color. You could do that as well. I am going to remove my mint tape here. This is a low tack tape, but I am going to be careful when I'm pulling back. It usually doesn't rip paper, but I still always like to not just try to rip it off. And then we can pop that circle out, and this is going to be our little window. What I really like about this card is I feel like you have like this little hidden scene. So when you open it all the way, you get to see that hidden scene inside, but you don't see it right away. And I just think that's kind of fun with this fun fold. But now we have our card. And now we have our fun opening. So here is our Z-fold card. Remember, you want the folds on the right-hand side, and we can start gluing our strips of paper down and decorating the inside of this. So let me add some tape runner on this, on these two pieces. These are the 5" by 1 3/4 inches. And then I'm going to put those in place. I started putting the pink down in the wrong spot. I'm going to put the pink closer to the inside. I'm going to change that here in a second because I'm going to do some stenciling with speckled egg, and I thought it would be nice to have the pink kind of break up the two blue-green. So I'm going to remove that here in a second when I realize that's not where I want that. And it is slightly smaller, so it does leave you a white frame around the edges. If you don't want a white frame, then just those pieces would be 2" by 5 1/4. But I kind of like having that white matte frame around it. Look at how pretty that polka dot paper is. I feel like Jamie, if she has not already, and maybe she already has this, but I just think a paper pad full of this kind of polka dot paper would make me so happy. I just think it's so beautiful. Okay, now I want to decorate this white part. This is essentially the inside card part that we're going to have our second little scene that's hidden. And so I want to do some stenciling. Let me just clean that off from that vintage photo. I did not dry off the back here, so thankfully you're not going to notice it right here. I'm like, oh no, I didn't dry it off and I left a little bit of vintage photo, but no big deal. I am going to use some low tack tape to tape off that pink polka dot paper. I don't want to stencil on that anymore. And I guess you could, you probably could have taped down the pink polka dot and then kind of stenciled over the whole back all the way. That would have worked too. But I wasn't there yet, so this is how I did it. So I'm going to take my little dome foam blender tool and speckled egg distress oxide, and I'm going to come in and just stencil in some of the areas. I do not want a complete stencil on here. I want darker in some areas, lighter in some areas, non-existent in some areas. So again, if that's not the look that you're going for, you could just stencil the background completely. And I'm going to go, you know, fairly light-handed. Some areas will be a little bit darker, but overall fairly light-handed on the background. So let me just finish up here. And so it's kind of splotchy looking, but that's kind of what I'm going for. Now, of course, I need to use vintage photo. Otherwise, this part is not going to match the rest of the card. So I'm going to do a little bit of the distressing. I do want to tap off some excess ink because I don't want it too dark. I just really want this to be an accent on all the little areas here. And then I want to go around the edges. I'm actually going to end up going around the edges of the whole card because on that right side, it's white as well. Sorry guys, I needed to kind of figure out how far in I wanted. I'm checking out my stamp here. I kind of do that with my design sometimes and deciding how is this going to look? How's that going to look? I'm very visual, so I need to put things in place. And I am going to splatter. So I'm going to smush my ink on my background and then just squish or spritz a little bit of water, use a paintbrush and just lightly splatter that stenciled area. I don't want to go overboard, but I do want a little bit of that. I really didn't splatter anywhere else, but I felt like that background needed a little bit of that. So now that that's done, I am, what I was trying to say before, and I'm so sorry, I interrupted myself. I am going to ink blend around the rest of that Z-fold card because I realized around the pink and green polka dot, it's very white. So I'm kind of checking it out in here. And when I close this, I noticed, oh, that part's really white compared to that stenciled background. I need to add just a little bit of the vintage photo. So I was just kind of looking at my design before I put everything together. And so I'm going to bring in that foam dome tool and just ink blend around the edges a little bit. Nothing crazy. I don't want it to be all vintage photo, but it needed a little something. So just what was kind of left on my brush or on my little tool there. And then I am going to go around on the inside where the stencil and the pink paper kind of meet. And I may have done that off camera, but I did add a little bit there. Okay, this is our smaller shaped die. So again, I'm using the nested wavy dies, but this is one size smaller than that larger one that we already die cut. And this is just white cardstock. This is going to hold some of our stamped images. And so I'm just lightly ink blending the edges with the vintage photo. Now in the homework, I did say to go ahead and stamp, color, and die cut your images. The house and the cute little chair and table with the tea and 3 butterflies because that's what we're going to be using on our card. So after I am doing the ink blending, I'm just going to rough up the edges of this one just a little bit. This one, I decided to rough up the edges after the ink blending because I actually wanted to see the white cardstock come through because this will be adhered against that tan polka dot cardstock. So that's the way I kind of did this one in reverse. So if you distress the edges first and then ink blend, those distress edges will catch the color. If you ink blend first and then distress the edges, if your cardstock is white or whatever color the cardstock is, that's going to show through on the edges. So just depending on what look you're going for. Let's stamp our sentiment from that super cute stamp set. And I am stamping the sentiment that says, escape to your happy place. I just have a scratch piece of paper in my Misty. I am going to ink this up with black ink. And there is coordinating dies for this, of course, in the kit, which I love a coordinating die for a sentiment. So let me ink that up. I'm inking it up a few times to get a nice, good, crisp, black, sharp image. Let me wipe off my stamp here and then put that back, and then we can use the coordinating die for this one. The second sentiment that we're going to be using is the little sentiment sheet that came in, and I don't remember which paper pad it came in the kit, but I'm going to use one of those sentiments for inside of this sentiment here. I use some of these on my sample cards, but I'm going to use one of these for the inside of this card. So let me get my paper trimmer. I'm going to trim this one out. This one says, home is not a place, it's a feeling. And I just think that's so true. So let me just trim this out, and then we can kind of get our sentiments put together. And then we'll have all of our elements done, and then we can get this fun fold card together. I'm just trying to trim this down, getting closer to my sentiment so I don't have so much white space around the edges of this sentiment here. And then let's get out that coordinating die for our sentiment. I don't know about you guys. I used to have a lot of trouble deciding what die cut went to the sentiment. Now I'm getting much, much better. But I remember when they kind of first came out, I was just like, I cannot find the matching die to this sentiment. I just always had so much trouble. So I'm so glad now it's not that kind of issue. Every once in a while I'll still get one wrong, but now I can do it so much better. But yeah, at first it was a little bit of a problem. So here is that coordinating die. I just used my little snips. I got those at like my local craft store forever ago for snipping like floral wire, and it totally works for snipping your dies. So just some low tack tape. I'm going to make sure I'm lining this up as best as I can. I actually think I got it nice and centered, and then I can run this through my die cut machine, and then we can do a little bit of distressing to the edges of the sentiments as well. But that's, again, that's your personal choice, however you want that to look. But I don't want anything too bright, because I feel like this is a little bit muted. The card's a little bit muted, and with a lot of that fun distressing. So let me get this out of the way. I'm going to bring my scissors in, and I did accidentally tear this sentiment a little bit. So definitely be careful with your scissors if it's a little bit thinner paper, like right there. But it's no big deal because we're going to be gluing it down. Totally fine. So now we've got our little edges roughed up. I am not going to rough this up too much, just the tiniest bit. I feel like this already has a lot of character because it's following, the die cut is following all the lines of the sentiment. And then just whatever is left on my vintage photo blender tool, I'm just going to go over the edges, kind of over the center a little bit, just to soften that stark white cardstock. I don't want it to be that bright. And then going around these edges very, very lightly. But I do have some of that paper that wanted to come off from the scissors. Let me dip this one more time. And I'm kind of inking it away from myself a little because I ripped that one area. I don't want to rip my whole sentiment apart. So around the edges, a little heavy in the corners on this one. There we go. Now we have our two sentiments. We can start getting this card together. I'm super excited about it. I couldn't wait to share this with you because when I saw it, I thought this is such a fun fold card. Let me clean up my work surface real quick, and then we can get this together. And this really is easy to put together. This is not a hard card at all. I think once you see it, it's kind of like, oh, that really is super simple. It seemed really difficult to me at first, and then I'm like, no, this is actually quite simple. So here are all of our components. Look at how pretty. Here's our little images that I colored. I just used alcohol ink markers, but obviously however you colored them is going to be absolutely fine. So here is everything that we are going to be using for this fun fold card. So let's start with our kind of our centerpiece. So this again is the smaller of the nested dies that I used. So I'm going to adhere that down to that tan polka dot paper, which is going to leave a little bit of a frame around the edge. But this is what's going to hold our first little scene. So when the card is closed, this is what you're going to see. I'm going to center that. And that's so pretty. And then I'm going to add a little bit of foam adhesive. I can't add it on the inside, which is kind of a bummer to me because I love foam adhesive. I love dimension on my cards, and I don't think it's rare I make a card without it. So I'm going to use a real low profile. I'm using 1mm foam adhesive behind this little image and the sentiment, and then we're going to place one butterfly on the front, but I'm going to use this really low profile just so it's just slightly popped off the background. I don't need it to be a lot because there already is a lot of fun things going on with this card with that fun fold, but like I said, I just love to have a little bit of dimension. So I'm going to put that in a few places, and then I can peel back the release paper and we can get that right in the center. And I'm going to kind of go down towards the bottom because we also have a sentiment that's going to need to go in place. So let me get my little pieces out of the way here. And let me put that right here at the bottom. How cute is this little image? I loved this stamp set so much. This kit was just so pretty and so cute. All the little animals, and I was trying to figure out a way to use the animals, but it just didn't work in my card design, but they are just so cute. The little chicken, the little lamb, oh, just darling, darling. Let's do that same 1mm foam adhesive behind the sentiment and get that taped into place. And again, this is the sentiment that says escape to your happy place. And I'm going to place that right above our chair and table and our little tea. And then, like I mentioned, I'm going to take one of these butterflies. I'm just going to use some liquid glue behind the butterfly. Now, don't have any of your stamped images hang off the edges of the largest die, the background die here, because it won't be able to move freely in the opening of the front of your card. So everything needs to stay within those lines. I think I'm going to put my butterfly up here at the top, but I am going to make sure that it does not hang over the edge. It was a little bit and I had to slide it back because I don't want that to be an issue. So it was just the tiniest bit, so I needed to push it. But that is our little front centerpiece. It's going to kind of peekaboo through that die cut in the front. But yeah, so don't let anything go past your edges there. Cute, cute. Sorry, let me move that one more time. Look at how darling that is. Oh, I love it. Okay, now I am going to kind of get my stuff out of the way. Let's get this part together. I'm going to adhere, adding adhesive to the biggest part of the Z-fold card. So the flat piece on the right hand side, I'm going to add tape runner and liquid glue because this is going to be moving a lot. I don't want this to come up at all. This is what's going to be placed inside of our A2 size card base. So if you open up your A2 size card base like you normally would, then this piece is going to go inside. So I'm going to actually close the Z fold, and that'll make it easy because again, this is slightly smaller than this back panel here. So I can just center this. It'll have a little bit of a frame around it. And then press that down. And this is going to be our fun fold card. So I'm going to really make sure everything is nice and adhered. So again, this is why you have to make this piece a little bit smaller. This is why this measures 5 1/4 instead of 5 1/2 tall. How cute is that? So now that you have the Z fold closed in there, the front of your card base closed, we're going to add this piece, our center piece from our shaped dies right in there. So the easiest way to do this is keep it closed, and we're just going to add glue on the right hand side where I have that greenish blue polka dot paper. I'm going to use liquid glue, but I'm going to make sure none of it leaks out anywhere else. So I'm going to kind of stay away from the edges a little bit. But this is the only spot that this shaped die is going to be adhered to. I should have also done tape runner. I kind of wasn't thinking. because that would have held it in place. So I'm going to hold it in place here just for a minute. And I left this in the video in case you are crafting along with me. That way you have time to have your stuff adhered to. So I'm just using some reverse tweezers and my fingers just to hold that down long enough for that liquid glue to just catch. But again, so that's, you're going to adhere it only on the right hand side on the Z fold part of the card, not the front part. It's not adhered to that front panel, just that Z fold panel. So when you have everything closed and folded in, that's where you're going to adhere it to. Look at how pretty that is with that patterned paper. That patterned paper is such a pretty frame. So now you open that up. I'm just making sure everything is nice and stuck down. And then you pop that open. Isn't that fantastic? And look at how easy this is to put together. I love it. Okay, so now for the rest of our images, I want to, my original thought was I was going to have it at the bottom right. But then I thought, no, I'm going to put everything in and it's going to hide behind this oval. So it's kind of like this little hidden scene. So when you go to open it up completely, now you have this other cute, fun sentiment and image behind it. So I'm just kind of opening and closing, making sure that everything is hidden well. I've got 2 butterflies left that I'm going to put around. I'm just kind of laying everything out. This little cottage is so cute. Oh, I just love it. So let me, now that I have those guys in place, I think I'm going to overlap that butterfly. This does not have any dimension back here, so I couldn't use foam adhesive back here. That's why I used it on the front. So I'm just going to use some regular adhesive to adhere this stuff to that background piece. So we're adhering it to the piece that we stenciled on the Z fold card. So let me get my sentiment. This says home is not a place, it's a feeling, which I think is a really cute little sentiment. Again, making sure that when that's closed, everything is hidden. And then let's glue this little cottage down in the center right below that sentiment. And depending on the size of opening that you used in the front, you know, would just depend on how this would work. You know, if you decided to go a little bit smaller or whatever, you know, this doesn't have to be hidden. It's most definitely not the end of the world if it's not. But now that I have that centered, and then I can glue on the 2 little butterflies, and then this card is going to be done, and I will show it again opening and closing. So let's get one here, and let's get one on that sentiment. I sure had fun sharing this fun fold card with you guys. I hope you guys had a lot of fun making it. I hope you're having a blast with this retreat and all the amazing talented instructors sharing all their fun creations with you. Let's take a look at this up close. So here's what it looks like completely closed, and then you can't see that other scene, but you open it and there you go. Now you have 2 scenes with all of that stenciling and beautiful pattern paper. It can stand up, and when it lays flat, this is what it looks like. I just think this is so fun. So thank you guys. I hope again that you enjoyed this project, and I hope you've enjoyed this retreat. Thank you guys so very much. Have a wonderful day.
Sunlight shining, coffee's poured, papers stacked, we're ready for more. From coast to coast, near and far, we're crafting together wherever we are. Scissors snipping, glitter flies, stamps are inked and colors collide. Cottage rose, let's craft away, laughing, creating all through the day. Cut it, fold it, layer with style, handmade magic, share a smile. Is it there?